Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Let me do this. I need to check my volume a little bit high. Let's bring that down a little bit and let's get the mic a little bit closer so we don't have to have any kind of weirdness. I hope you guys are doing all right. And you guys are having a damn good morning up to this point. I'm not going to be a geopolitical chauvinist. If you are in the evening, wherever you are, you're under this voice. You have my deepest appreciation for being under this voice, and I thank you for being under this voice. This voice is a little congested today, but being congested is not necessarily going to stop us from doing the news as we do Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. We have a full show for you today. So starting off, we're going to have Marwa Osman. She is the one from Press TV. She was on the show maybe a few months ago. She was a fantastic guest, very intense, but the intensity is rational. In America, and let's say in Europe, where our mornings are get up, sex with wife, coffee, breakfast, work, come back home, PlayStation, sex with mistress, if you're Gavin Newsom, and fall asleep, rinse and repeat. That's your day. And of course, there's variations in the context of that day, right? But that's a day. That's what we consider to be a day. Maybe you hang out with friends. Maybe you go to a bar. Maybe you, if you're like one of my friends, you go to a strip club. Maybe you go to a prayer meeting. Whatever your day is, that's your day. It is understood to be your day. It is very clear that that's your day. You're a hamster on a wheel, and you rinse and repeat. That's your understanding of the world. If you're in Europe, it's something similar, right? You get a croque monsieur, sit, drink tea, coffee, smoke, sit at the Eiffel Tower, you sit at a club or sit at a restaurant. The waiter never comes to you. You go to make groceries. That's your day. That gives you a perspective of the world, meaning that shapes a workable point of view of what the world is like. But truth is, that's not really what the world is like. That's what your world is like, if that makes sense. Meaning that is your reality. That is the reality to which you live. That is the reality to which you've become accustomed to because people conform to the realities to which they're engaging. You go somewhere else where U.S. policy is in effect, and U.S. policy is getting people killed. Okay, that's a different reality. And I make this point about Russia, right? When I'm talking about Ukraine, and I'm like, they've been killing and dying for the last 3 years. That gives you a certain take on the world, what is allowed in that world. If you go back to the Second World War and you look at some of the things that were happening, you would be shocked by those things. You'd be like, I can't believe people were living that way. But that was the reality. That was what they conformed to because of events that they were effectively confronting. I'm saying that our reality doesn't really give us a good basis to understand what people are going through when they are being shot, killed, bombed, attacked, under threat, under pressure, and under threat of being attacked. If somebody blows up your house, if somebody kills a family member, if these things are happening to you in a way that they've left an imprint upon you, your take on the world is going to be a certain thing. And this is obvious, or at the very least, it should be obvious, even though in the way that we engage it, we can only engage it intellectually, not on a gut emotional level. So when she is explaining her take, and some of my guests come on and they'll be like, God, that guy's intense. Why is that guy intense? You think that guy's intense just because he's intense? Or do you think the person is intense because of the life that they've effectively lived? And I'm saying it's the life that they lived. Our realities are vastly different. And because our realities are vastly different, it gives a different, let's say, tinge in the way that we evaluate events and the gut level to which those events are accepted or those events are relayed when they're explained. She was intense. She was a damn good guest. And I love her intensity because it got across the realities on the ground that they're confronting on a daily basis. She's going to be on the show at 7:15. We have Ted Rall. Ted Rall is back. Obviously, Ted Rall is a New Yorker, so he is going to probably be talking about Mondani and the victory that he has had against not just, well, Cuomo, but also the Democratic establishment as a whole. I mean, after all, they hated his guts. The last thing they wanted him to do is win. And if you think of a Sanders type figure, which Mondani is on a certain degree, but he's 40 years younger, doesn't mind throwing a punch, doesn't mind having a knife fight in phone booth. But the catch becomes, does he mean it? And will he be able to accomplish the objectives to which he told New Yorkers he was going to be able to accomplish? That is all it boils down to. It's not about what you say. People can say anything. People are used to people just making stuff up. Can you do it in real terms? And I know there are a lot of people on this channel that says, this guy is AOC with a penis. I know a lot of you think that. And you may be right. You may be wrong. Time will tell. We also have Professor Wolff. He's going to be on the show. Always love Professor Wolff. Professor Wolff is one of the brightest people that I know. He's given me a workable point of view of the world, which is one of the highest honors I can effectively bestow upon somebody. Look, I've told you before, the take of the audience doesn't entirely influence my point of view, unless I think I'm wrong. And one of the clear things I realized early on in doing a channel, I mean, keep in mind, I've been doing the channel for over a decade. You have to hold your shape. Holding your shape is a positive thing, unless you're wrong, in which case you need to be able to acknowledge that you're wrong. Taking on a person's workable point of view or allowing somebody to bestow a workable point of view upon you, to me, is an honor. And so when I say that as a very high honor for Professor Wolff. How he appraises the world, to me, is just right. He's going to be on the show, obviously. And Maloof. Maloof is back. So Maloof, there was no friction or anything between Maloof and I. Maloof just wasn't necessarily in the best of health. And so he was on the bench. He was laid up. Maloof is going to be back, better than ever, new and improved. And so it is going to be great to have a conversation with Maloof. The conversation I want to have with Maloof, okay, with 4 minutes, is whether or not Putin is getting America wrong. I think that conversation needs to be had. The Chinese, I think, has provided a lesson for the rest of the world in dealing with America. And I know every other country is not China, so fair enough. Countries have to deal with the mechanics at their disposal in the way that they engage. But China took a pretty strident position of, you're not the boss of us. You're not going to bully us. This idea of hegemony is over in the context of dealing with us. If you want to deal with Timbuktu that way, God bless you. You can deal with Timbuktu that way, even though it's China. We don't necessarily like you doing that. But if you do it, you do it. You're going to deal with us as a peer. And when the U.S. decided to try to pull the trade war, the tariff war, the chip war, China responded in kind and effectively folded Donald Trump. What Carl Joss said, tacos on Thursdays are just as good as Tuesdays. Yeah. Folded Trump up. Trump realized he didn't have cards in that situation in order to push those events. It's not that China wanted a trade war. Any war, any contest, any conflict boils down to you not just throwing a punch, but being able to take a punch. Meaning, I need to be able to take damage, and I need to be able to withstand that damage and impart enough damage on my opponent for that opponent to effectively capitulate. But you're still taking damage in the context of any kind of war, any kind of fight. I'm saying it's not that China wanted to do it, but there are times where you need to assert we are equals and you will treat us as equals. I think the problem with the Russian position is that over and over again, they continuously try to negotiate. And this almost obsequious need, as it comes across, this pragmatism, it's not just taken as weakness. I'm beginning to think it is weakness. Now, do they need to do that? No. Do they have psychological evaluation of Donald Trump that make them think that maybe Trump will at some point come to some kind of deal? Maybe. But that is, as an American, I live here. I was born and raised here. That's not the way we look at that stuff. And there's a level of hubris built into any kind of president that takes that office. And you get a media that fulfills that hubris, or at the very least, they'll say emboldens that particular hubris. And you get a political establishment that also emboldens that particular hubris. So the president, regardless of the president, is going to act a particular way, unless he's forced to do otherwise, in the way that China forced the U.S. to do otherwise. There was a deal in Alaska. There was. I know a lot of you don't believe it, but there was. The conversation that Putin and Trump had on that stage made it very clear that the U.S. offered a deal. Moscow, or Putin at the very least, I suppose gave a counteroffer, but for all intents and purposes accepted the deal and was waiting for a response from the United States. This is very clear at this point. The response that Russia got was the U.S. bombing oil fields, bombing oil infrastructure, and of course, its attacks in the region. Are the Russians getting the U.S. wrong? I think that's a question that I would love to have Maloof answer any cage. My guest is here, and I want to go to her. We are joined with Marwa Osman. How you doing, Marwa? You doing okay this morning?
Hey, Jamal. I'm doing good, considering
it's afternoon for you.
The news here.
Well, that is what I want to get into. Just for the audience, Marwa Osman, she's a journalist, TV host for Press TV, Middle East Stream, Expose, and Universal lecturer and political commentator. Go into that for me, because maybe I'm unaware of the news that's taking place there on the ground. Please explain.
Thanks again, Jamal, for having me on your live show. Let's begin by I'm sitting in a very deep room within my house because the sound of the drones, I tried, but it's very, very loud. And today is an exception of the loud noise of the Zionist Israeli drones that are violating our airspace because of what happened this morning. The Lebanese resistance Hezbollah initiated the first open letter since the end of the war, and the letter it explains that that the Israeli entity did not commit to the ceasefire agreement of the 1701 that was initially drafted after the 2006 war, but it was reintroduced into the agreement between Lebanon and the Zionist Israeli side after the recent war on Lebanon in 2023-2024. So when the ceasefire was announced on November 27th, 2024, it was announced that both sides will cease actual fire. But Hezbollah's statement today was an open letter to the Lebanese president and the Lebanese speaker and the Lebanese prime minister, basically just letting them know that what's being said behind closed doors about a possible new agreement to be forged with the Zionist entity with one-on-one meetings, meaning normalization with Zionist Israel. It didn't explicitly say that in the letter, but you can read between the lines. They said that it is not acceptable, and the demand by Zionist Israel and the Americans who are backing them that the resistance should disarm in all of Lebanon is unacceptable, because according to the 1701 agreement, only the northern part of the Litani River, which is like a line drawn across the southern part of Lebanon, which is 5 kilometers. It's some areas 5, some areas 7 kilometers between the border between Lebanon and occupied Palestine, up to 5 kilometers inside of Lebanese territory, would be an area that is a no weapons area. But now Zionist Israel says we won't stop the attack on civilians, which actually this morning also in Abbasiyah, there was an actual air raid in Abbasiyah, and several civilians fell as martyrs and wounded for that aggression, as a result of that aggression as well. So Hezbollah is saying we will not accept that. We will not accept the disarmament of the resistance when we are being attacked. I mean, the aggression never stopped. The Israelis didn't even show any sort of commitment from their side that they will abide by the signed agreement and by international law and by all UN resolutions that they would stop. they will leave the 5 points, which became 7 points that they are now occupying in the southern part of Lebanon. So just after that's minutes after that statement, we started reading breaking news from Channel 12 of the Israeli entity saying that now Zionist Israel is preparing for a wider war with Lebanon to quote unquote, once and for all, get rid of Hezbollah, and that Zionist Israel also, quote unquote, will not accept to return to the terms of October 6, 2023, meaning the deterrence between Lebanon and Zionist Israel, which was the case between both sides since the 2006 war. Since the 2006, there was a deterrence that if you attack, we will attack. If you kill, we will kill back. And that deterrence was broken after the terrorist attacks of the pagers on Lebanon. That also preceded the assassination of more than 25 top leaders of the resistance, ending with the assassination of the commander himself, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. So after that, also breaking news that came from Zionist Israeli Channel 12, we had the drone again, which actually has become just part of the routine. But today it's very, very loud, which led me to sit in this area where even the shadow, the light is not really helping. So I'm sorry for that, but I tried because the noise it's very loud. Just to be able to speak freely. I can still hear it. I don't know if you guys can, but this is basically what happened today. But how will things escalate? How will they unfold? I seriously don't know, because this is the first open letter from the resistance towards the government in Lebanon. And I'm pretty sure that there are certain things that the government will understand that we, the people, might not, because they are in direct contact on a daily basis. We have seen several attempts by the Lebanese army, last of which was last night in Mays al-Jabal village, right across the border from Zionist Israel. It's an area where it's open. We never had a wall between us in that area, so it's open. There was an attempt of infiltration, of invasion by the Zionist entity, not invasion, infiltration, which was met by the Lebanese army moving into that area and setting a checkpoint. So this has been the norm over the past 3 weeks, ever since the president gave orders to the Lebanese army commander, what's known as the LAF, Lebanese Army Forces, to basically reciprocate that if they get attacked by Zionist Israel, they should reciprocate. But that command is unconstitutional because it needs the entire government to sign on it. So it's more of a verbal threat against the Israelis, and it is a warning to the Americans, telling them from the president's side that this has gone way too much out of hand and you need to do something to step up the security of the southern part of Lebanon. But here we are.
I read that letter, and one of the things Hezbollah pointed out was there needs to be a unity between Hezbollah and the government in regards to responding to Israeli aggression. That for all intents and purposes, Israel never abided by the ceasefire. And so if they didn't abide by the first agreement, what is the point in having a second agreement? Basically, the more that you give, the more they want. There is no way to make a legit agreement between Israel, with the exception of some kind of deterrence or parity built into it.
Usually, Jamal, when you want to build some sort of new ties, even if it's with the enemy, you at least abide by the measurements or the truce or the ceasefire or any terms of a past agreement first. You show some sort of a trust building process. Zionist Israel doesn't know even what a building process means. They only know how to destroy. So why would the Lebanese government itself, not the resistance, why would the Lebanese government trust the Zionist entity? I mean, Tom Barak himself in a recent interview said, if I were Hezbollah, I would refuse to disarm because Zionist Israel keeps hitting everyone in the region. Even the top envoy, the US envoy to the region, says that the actions of Israel are actually hindering any kind of peace process, if there ever will be a peace process. Because even if the government does it, our government has done it before in the 80s, Jamal, in what is known as the Ittifaq 17 Ayar, the agreement of 17 of May. And that agreement fell nosedived less than a month later, and it ignited one of the fiercest resistance against Zionist Israel, and ended up in basically just ousting the government that was in place at that time. And I don't think there was a president, but there was a government. So it will just be a repetition, but this time the blowout will be even fiercer. It will be bigger. larger, because at that time Hezbollah was just a couple of hundreds. It's not even, it wouldn't even amount to hundreds. But now we're speaking about hundreds of thousands of personnel, and we're speaking about a public that has had enough, that have paid a lot of blood to keep this country safe and secure and out of occupation. And people like me, who are civilians, Southerners, we will never accept Zionist Israel to occupy our land. Yes, they were able to take control of our skies and bomb us and kill 10,000 between civilians and fighters, 10,000 in 66 days, but they weren't able to occupy any village. They were able to occupy 5 hills. And they occupied these 5 hills because they broke the ceasefire between November and January 2025. That's the only reason. During the war, they were not able to advance. So we will not allow them to advance. I will never. Would you allow anyone to come and take your house, Jamal? It's my land, my house, where my loved ones are buried. I think Zionist Israel still doesn't understand that even if we have to pay even more hefty blood for this, we're ready to pay it, because there's nowhere else for us to go.
No, psychopaths are not. They're psychopaths. It's, you know, it's not about right and wrong. It's about what they think they can accomplish and what they think they can get. What is the government going to do in this? Is the government taking a more strident stance with this? Is the government going to acknowledge
there's a
Hezbollah's letter?
difference between, we haven't seen any reply yet. I think it was released at 10 a.m. this morning, so we haven't really seen any reply. And I think the replies will be put out in tonight's news bulletins. This is how Lebanon's news works. At night we have the major news bulletins in our country, so that I think that will be the time where we will hear replies, if we hear replies today. Because Zionist Israel already started escalating. As I told you, they air raided areas in Abbasiyah in South Lebanon, killing and wounding many civilians. So we'll have to wait and see. But it doesn't show. Look, the past, it's been, the government has been in place. We are in November, so it's 11 months since the government has been in place, and the president was elected in January 9, if I'm not mistaken. And just 1 week later, the government was born. And since then, they haven't shown their own people, us, Southerners, any sort of realistic work, effective effort to stand by us. Least that they could have done is start with the reconstruction process. At least, if not full reconstruction, at least is to rehabilitate what can be rehabilitated, because not all houses have been brought down. Some houses have been damaged. Some houses have been partly brought down, like my house, for example. I did not wait for anyone. I actually started reconstruction in February. January was the time where end of January, last week of January was the time where we allowed into Khiyam, into our area. February was me started reconstruction of my house. I'm not going to be waiting for anyone. Doesn't matter who that side is. It's my house. I'm rebuilding it. So, but there are certain areas that the government, instead of helping the people and showing that it has this intent of being beside their own people, they're sending the police over to stop people from reconstruction, saying that it's illegal, that you need the necessary paperwork to reconstruct what Zionist Israel rebuilt, and that specifically in the southernmost bordering areas in South Lebanon. And we it's up to here. We, the people, it's up to here with. So no, they haven't shown, and past experience with the government of Nawaf Salam has shown that he is actually provocative against the environment of the resistance. He basically stopped any meetings after the Rall protest that was supposed to happen with a couple of 20 people, with a small event to illuminate and light up the Rall, which is a cultural heritage in Lebanon, with the image of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah during the anniversary in September 27, or during the week of September 27. And the prime minister ended up stopping that event and saying it's illegal, to a point that people were so provoked that instead of 20 or 25 people just taking part of this event, 55,000 humans went down to the streets to tell the government, you are provoking us. Stop it, because if you continue, we will continue and we will break you. We will take you out of your order. We will make sure that we take back authority in our country. They keep provoking the people, and it will end up in an explosion in their face, a political explosion in their face, where the people would take back what belongs to them, which is the authority. So no, the government is not doing anything to try to show its intent, at least to protect and defend Lebanon.
But it has to understand that any negotiation or deal with Israel is not to the benefit of Lebanon at this point. Meaning, as you pointed out, they didn't stick with the original deal. And if they didn't stick with the original deal, what is the point of having a new deal? And as Hezbollah is kind of making this argument, like, look, we need a strategic unity of purpose, as the way I read the document, that the government forces need to be able
Jamal,
to work.
you're speaking as if that the government is actually one of a government of sovereignty. It's not. It was placed into power by Americans, and the Americans are dictating what should be done or else, because they're telling them, we will sanction each and every one of you, not only your institutions. They could actually put the president on the sanctions list, because I told you the presidency is different from the prime ministry. The
Right.
President Joseph Aoun actually has good ties with the leadership of Hezbollah. It's built upon years of experience between the both sides, and he was part of the military when they fought together in the Battle of Fajr al-Jurud. It's called the Fajr al-Jurud, the Dawn of the Outskirts battle, which happened between the Lebanese side and the terrorist side in Syria, when the Al-Qaeda and ISIS were trying to take villages in Lebanon, and Lebanon stood side by side, army and resistance, to defend, and they won that battle. So since then, he has very good experience with the leadership of Hezbollah, and he has in his sworn speech, when he was being sworn in as president, he said that it's a priority for us to defend Lebanon and to reconstruct Lebanon. And he said that Lebanon has every right to defend itself. He didn't use the word resistance for the first time since the 1990s, but he said that Lebanon has every right to defend itself. He didn't say what means, because he still wanted to be friends with the resistance, and at the same time give the Americans what they want to hear, is that Lebanon will work as a legitimate government and the army should take that protective measures to protect their citizens. But when he actually called upon the leader and commander of the Lebanese army forces and asked him to protect the Lebanese people and stand against any sort of threats that come from an aggression that comes from Zionist Israel, the whole pro-American bloc in Lebanon went berserk. They lost their mind. They started saying that the president is a traitor. And they're saying that, oh, they're pushing the army in a conundrum. But I'm sorry, soldiers go and enlist in the army to defend their country, or else they're just going to work as valet parking personnel to park vehicles that the Americans give us, that they used to use in the 1960s and 70s in Vietnam. That's what the vehicles that our army operate with. Or else, why would anyone enlist in the country's army if they're not willing to defend and protect the army? You kept saying, the political bloc that is pro-American, you kept telling us you should shift from your resistance option and let the resistance give its weapon to the army, and the army shall protect you. And now when the president says the army should protect the people, you go berserk and you lose your mind? Talk about hypocrisy.
Do you have a belief that the military will defend Lebanon if and when Israel attacks? Or
I do have a belief, but I don't trust the capabilities, because Americans have never allowed the Lebanese army to arm properly. Like in the 1950s, Jamal, if you read Lebanon's history, in the 1950s, the Lebanese army had research labs in universities, because Lebanon, as small as it is, was the first country in the Arab world that had universities, that had higher education. In the 1950s, and I think it's 1956 in specific, the Lebanese army had a contract with the Hagazian University in Lebanon, and they used to manufacture weapons for the army, including missiles. So we used to manufacture our own weaponry until the Americans said, no, you're not allowed, because this is a threat to Zionist Israel. So, and since then, the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and the Syrians, before the fall of the regime, they all offered to arm and to enhance the capabilities of the Lebanese army just so they can be up and ready to fight Zionist Israel. The Americans wouldn't allow it. They said that we will put you on the sanctions list. We will sanction the Lebanese army itself, the commanders, the soldiers, the generals. And, you know, they are fully capable of doing that. And we don't have real men in those positions in the government. They all are at the very best at the hands of Zionist Israel. If I want to say at the hands of the Americans, if I want to stay respectful to them and to their positions. They are afraid of what would happen to them and to their extended families, because Lebanon is like a canton of cartels of capitalism. Each one of those people in power have their own extended family that benefits from the resources of the country, which makes them richer. And now the Americans, after they were able to successfully install a new governor for the Lebanese Banque du Liban, which is the central bank of Lebanon, after the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of banks happened in 2019 at the hands of the former governor of the Lebanese central bank, Riyad Salameh. They installed an American Lebanese central bank governor who they control, who now has more power than the president himself because of the backing of the Americans, and keeps putting on sanctions small Lebanese businesses only because they offer help and loans for the public to start reconstruction, and because they actually allow fundraising for the people to do construction. So we, the people across the world, the diaspora of Lebanon, were trying to help each other to rebuild, and they stopped those financial institutions and small non-governmental organizations from doing that by putting sanctions on them and by not allowing them to open any accounts, whether in banks or in regular financial transfer shops, which are, you find many of them in Lebanon, like Wish shops and OMT shops, or what other ways known as the Western Union shops. They stop. They are besieging the people and the institutions. So because of that, I do think that the Lebanese army has the intent, the will, and the heart to protect us, but they don't have the capabilities. Zionist Israel would massacre them. I'm sorry to say.
The goal seems to be very specific: to steal land. I mean, for one, Israel is attacking construction equipment. They're attacking anything that's dealing with construction. And as you point out,
private company-owned construction. So it's like it's civilians. They're attacking civilian private companies, which are helping out with the reconstruction.
Right. So it seems to be the objective is, well, we want to prevent the reconstruction because we want to steal that particular territory, meaning the attack was always in the fix. It was always the expectation or the assumption that that's what was going to take place.
Of course, Jamal. I mean, the Mossad himself, Yossi Sarel himself, was saying that he came up with the idea of the Pagers terrorist attack in 2002. That's before the 2006 war.
Right.
So these people have always had in mind a way to kill us and to weaken us and to claim our land as theirs. Because look, for 55 years, the Syrian Arab Republic did not fight against Zionist Israel. It was just once in 2017 when they downed using SAM-2 missiles. They downed an F-16. I remember that distinctively because I was celebrating that day heavily. But later on, we figured out and we were told by very credible sources that it was actually the resistance that did that. The Lebanese resistance was the force that downed, but Syria took the blame, if you will. It's a pride, it's not a blame, because it happened because the F-16 was above Syrian occupied land. So it doesn't matter who downed it, but they did. That was the only time that it was registered that Syria downed an F-16 above its airspace. So Syria for 55 years did not touch Israel. What did Israel do? Exactly right after December 8, 2024, they invaded Syria. They bombed any sort of military post that they think is a threat to them. And they took nearly 700 square kilometers of land, and the richest land in resources and water in the region. And they took the highest mountains that overlook Lebanon and Syria, which the Syrian Arab Army won back after the 67 war. So no kind of threat ever came from Syria, and yet Israel took the land. And look, Netanyahu told us he will do this in 2022 when he held at the UNGA that map showing Greater Israel. The man was telling the truth, and he just needed the spark to start his plan. And the spark for him was October 7, which I repeat time and again. There's no force on this planet that would make me believe that the Zionist entity had no idea that October 7 was happening.
They did know. Egypt,
and there's no power. Egypt told them. Egypt told them. And they knew. They knew. I mean, Gaza is right there, and they have surveillance over it 24/7 for the past 18 years. They know. And no power on this earth would make me believe that Hamas and the Islamic Jihad were able to kill 1,700 Israelis in 7 hours. The Islamic Jihad and the Al-Quds brigades, Al-Qassam brigades, were able to kill between 200 and 250 military men during their rightful operation against an occupation in October 7 to kidnap, I'm saying it, to kidnap, take captive, I think 200 plus Israeli captive, to swap with more than, back then, 9,000 Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. When Netanyahu looked at the number, he didn't like it. And he saw that it was all military. He didn't like it. He initiated the Hannibal directive and killed his own people. I mean, we also, the Toyota trucks with young men with AK-47, they cannot bring down houses and eliminate a parking lot of cars. That was done with helicopters and tanks. So he wanted this blood in order to kickstart the plan that he showed us back in 2022, which is Greater Israel. And for now, after he did what he did for the past 2 years, genocide, no one said a word, a couple of protests here and there. But the good part in it, nothing comes good out of a genocide except brainwashed people were able to be woken by the smell of blood, Palestinian blood that was spilled over the past 2 years. Add to that, Lebanese blood, Jamal, which no one mentions, and I swear to you, by the head of my 3 girls, we don't want anyone to mention our blood. We're okay. We just want the genocide to stop in Gaza. That's why we supported. We started the support front. Over the past at least 70 years, Lebanon has been hit time and again with massacres. Since 1942, not 48, we have massacres registered in Lebanon and the southern part of Lebanon since 1942, with the Haganah terrorist gangs attacking our villages and massacring our people. And still, the Palestinian cause is a priority for us. We don't want people to talk about us. We can talk about us. It's fine. We don't want anyone to defend us. You can defend us. It's fine. But just to witness a siege, a genocide, killing humans, bombing hospitals, bombing schools, fathers running in the streets, holding in plastic bags the remaining dismembered parts of their children, all of that never pinched at least a slight effort to abide by international law, by the Western powers that keep feeding Zionist Israel with the weapons it needs to kill us. So we will not wait for anyone to tell us what to do, how to do it, or to come and help us. The land is ours. Even if they take every type of weapon from us, we have the rocks of our mountains that could protect us.
There is no such thing as international law. And I think the genocide makes that very clear. Also, the issues are interrelated. Israel's murder and widespread mass murder of the Palestinians, it's completely related to what is taking place in Lebanon. They're intrinsic. You can't separate the two. It's the fact that the entity exists in and of itself, the Zionist entity that exists in and of itself. Greater Israel is the project. That is the objective. And they've been very open with us at this point. What is the letter that Hezbollah put out? What do you think the government's response is going to be to that? And all things being equal, is that a threat? Is that a indication that Hezbollah, regardless of what the government does, will defend that land?
It is a threat to Zionist Israel, and it is an open, if you will, statement, a very formal yet very clear statement for the government that we acknowledge that you have tried every diplomatic road there ever existed to try and stop the aggression, and you failed.
Yes.
We know that you have been ordered to dismantle us and make your army fight us. That is what Tom Barak said. The army should fight its people. We are arming them to fight their people. And then he
Yes.
corrected himself and said Hezbollah, as if Hezbollah is not their people. But
Their
anyways,
people. Right.
so Hezbollah is telling the government, we know, we acknowledge that you have tried. We gave you almost a year. November 27 is just 2 weeks away or 3 weeks away. And our civilians, our people have been paying the price all throughout that year, added to that the 2 years that passed before it. We will not let loose of our right or take it for granted to protect the people that we vowed to protect. Because the last part of the statement of the open letter says, we vow to our people to remain truthful to the basically promises that we made for them, to protect them, to defend their land, to defend their children. No one, even in this government, Jamal, I've even spoken about the 26 detainees, Lebanese detainees who were taken by Zionist Israel during the war. They didn't even, they gave away an Israeli spy. This government gave away to Israel an Israeli spy in a show of good intent instead of swapping them with our people, with our men. There are men who we held funerals for, where the newly liberated Palestinian detainees, after the end of the so-called genocide, which did not end so far, but after the so-called ceasefire in Gaza, those who were liberated, like the famous Mahmoud, I don't want to say the wrong family name, but if you remember the Jalboa prison break with the spoons that happened 3 years ago. Yeah, so those people who were freed from that prison said, we had Lebanese detainees with us who came in during the genocide that we in Lebanon held funerals for because we thought they were dead.
And they're prisoners.
They are prisoners. And the government did not even think about doing a swap. So we don't have the least trust, or at least intend to trust this government, because they didn't show that to us. And at the end of the day, there will be elections next year, 2026 in Lebanon. So that government that is now in place will not be able to implement what the Americans are demanding from it, because it's far beyond what it's capable of doing and far beyond what is allowed to happen on the ground in Lebanon. Because look, the people, the Western part of this world, especially the governments and the authorities, they keep thinking that they can disarm our resistance, which protects us, or that they can pressure it by Zionist Israeli aggression and it will cease to protect us. It won't cease to protect us, but what they don't know is we won't cease to protect it either. It is let's talk a bit of math. It's a proportional. It's a proportional relationship. We protect the resistance, and the resistance protects us back. So in no way, shape, or form, Jamal, will the government be able to actually implement what the Americans are demanding, because we, the people, will not allow it. And it's as simple as that.
Are you expecting an attack by Israel, or even worse, the Wahhabis in Syria? One of the
attacks have not stopped. Let's begin by saying the war has not stopped against Lebanon.
That's right.
Look what happened this morning.
That's true.
But from the newly appointed terrorists in Syria, anything could happen, but they don't have the capabilities. Zionist Israel made sure that they don't have the capabilities. They have the capabilities to kill their own people and start massacres in the coast and in Suwaida.
Yes.
But we also what kind of weaponry they have. They wouldn't stand, and even the Lebanese army has good experience with those terrorists, and the army itself can actually protect Lebanon when it comes to the terrorists. But if they are given new weapons like drones, they can create chaos, and they can negatively affect the military battlefield in Lebanon. But the real threat, as always, comes from the F-16s and F-35s and the bombers, the new B-2 bombers, for example. Because even Zionist Israel itself, it was able to mobilize 75,000 soldiers when the war in Lebanon was at its peak during the 66-day war, 2024. And they were not able to occupy. But they were able to inflict real heavy losses when it comes to bombing. So yes, we expect Israel to continue. No one expects peace from Israel. Even Egypt is at its toes, knowing that it might have to defend its own land, because the new plan for Trump and Netanyahu is to completely just exile all the Gaza population, ethnically cleanse them into the Egyptian land, and Egypt is not ready to give out any land for anyone.
Do you think they
even
will
the
be able to
Egyptians who are in direct...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you think they will be able to do that? I mean, I've seen this quote unquote plan that the Trump administration has for Gaza, this idea of trying to empty out Gaza either through murder or, for that matter, expulsion. Do you think that would work? Do you think that would be successful?
I think they might attempt to do it, but I also think that it will be a direct national security threat for Egypt. And I think Sisi knows this very well, because historically speaking, the army is one of the most important and most powerful institutions in Egypt. The army is much more powerful than the political institutions in Egypt. Hence why Sisi is a former military man himself. But Sisi knows very well that there's a limit for him to abide by the demands of Zionist Israel and the Americans. And even if he gives his okay, we have, how much is Egypt? 120 million is the population of Egypt. It's not going to look good. It's going to create a lot of problems for Sisi and his government. And I don't think that they are ready for this. And Jordan does not have the capacity to hold new population, new exodus into Jordan. Even if they want to make it happen, it's also not going to be able to. It's going to be very hard to implement. But will they attempt and try? I'm sure they will.
Yeah, up to this point, Egypt and Jordan have said no. From my understanding, 60-70% of Jordan is already full of Palestinians.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not going to look.
And Jordan also has a lot of problems with the new authority in Syria, because it sees all of its northern border under the direct control of terrorists that even Jordan was fighting against during the global war against Syria. Yes, they do prefer those people now in Damascus over Bashar al-Assad, but at least during the reign of Bashar al-Assad, Jordan didn't have anything to be worried about when it comes to its security, that any threat could come from the northern part of its territories. But now there's serious threat, because don't look what the news is telling you. This is also what I teach my students, like sources. The real source is an internal source when you talk to the people on the ground there. And I have a lot of friends in Jordan, especially in the Ramtha, which is the northeastern part of Jordan. And they are tribes, very well-known tribes, Arab tribes, very proud of their heritage. And they actually supported the Syrian Arab army before the fall of the regime. And now they see the newly appointed terrorists in Syria as a threat to them, in specific to those tribes in the northern part of Jordan. And I talk to them, and they tell me that the sentiment within the community is that they're getting ready. They're mobilizing to protect their communities. And they do trust their army, but at the same time, they know that their army is being run by a king who is basically just a remnant of the British Empire. And he considers himself an ally for the Americans. The Americans consider him a puppet for them. So they know that, and their concern is valid. And I think that they put their worries into action. And if anything could happen, they are ready to defend their country. So it is a volatile time, and the region is on a very hot plate. So it's not only about Lebanon. As you said, Jamal, when you started, what's happening in Palestine is directly proportional and linked to what's happening in Lebanon. I tell you, it's directly proportional and linked to what's happening in the entire region, even as far as Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's also linked to that, because now when everyone saw what kind of entity the Zionist entity is and how it doesn't even respect the so-called rules-based order that is being put in place by the Western powers themselves, every nation that finds itself capable of taking land or occupying or starting a war with its neighbor is doing so. We saw what happened between Pakistan and India, between Pakistan and Afghanistan, between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and now Azerbaijan is adamant on taking parts of Armenia. Nonetheless, that Turkey has already taken part, still occupies the Ararat Mountains, which is part of Armenia. And you have Turkey that has taken full control of the northern part of Syria. And when I say full control, I don't only mean military control. They have included their own institution and their own culture within the communities. Even the schools in northern Syria, if you go to that school, the flag in front of that school is a Turkish flag. The language that they are being taught and the education is in Turkish. It's a Turkish curriculum. So it's the money, the currency that they are using. It's no longer the Syrian currency. It is the Turkish lira. So you have that. You have in the southern part of Syria, soon the Israeli. What's the currency of Israel? The shekel, the Israeli shekel. And then you have also in the eastern part of Syria, which is completely under the control, eastern part of the Euphrates is completely under the control of the Americans. If Syria has been liberated, and if Julani is now the best friend of Trump, why is still their boots on the ground in Syria? Because they are stealing Al Omar oil field and the crude oil of Syria and the Al Omar field and another field. That's why America goes anywhere at the moment. And now they are attempting to also start a war with Venezuela. Trump promised that he will stop the war on Ukraine. It seems that he will only just pour more fuel on the fire there. And the entire European continent is under threat, because if a war actually breaks out between them and Russia, look, the entire world is on fire. And if you look at the essence of it, it was made possible because of all the green card, the carte blanche that was given to Zionist Israel to do what it needs to do. I mean, to a point, right now, we're hearing people like genocidaire terrorists like Ben Gvir voicing their disapproval and dismay at the election of a mayor in one of the states of the United States of America. I mean, they enlist and insert themselves in everything that's happening, which directly implies that they are an extended part of the colonial world. They are an extended part of colonialism in our land, and they want to have a say in everything, and they want everyone to pay them for it, and they want to have the rights for any sort of inventions that happen in the world, crypto inventions, military inventions, and they want to test them on us. All of this is happening, and while I'm telling you this, I imagine myself watching it in a sci-fi movie, but it's happening in real life. I mean, what we saw with the terrorist pager attack is something that I've never even imagined in my life. And then you have someone like Yossi Sorel go on TV and say, oh, you don't know what we have inserted in multiple countries, not only in Lebanon. And the person in front of him was saying, even like allied countries, like maybe Europe, he said, yes, they are uncontrollable anymore. They are thugs, armed and being paid by Western taxpayers' money to wreak havoc in the world. So what do you expect? Also, of course, chaos will just explode everywhere else.
Marwa, as I said, I don't think there's a such thing as international law, and I think you're making that argument very proficiently. I want to thank you for this. I always appreciate these conversations. I'm always illuminated by it. I always learn something in it. I hope the audience learns something in it, what's taking place on the ground. By the way, Vanessa Bealey told me to tell you hi.
Oh,
she apparently, you guys are
baby.
friends. Um,
Well,
Thank you for this.
nice
I
to be
really
here. Thank
appreciate
you for giving me the time and the chance to be here. And hopefully, maybe we'll meet again before Zionist Israel takes us all out. Yani, hopefully, we'll have more time in the future to talk about it. Look, I
it.
kid about it. I joke about it because I
It's
know it
black.
can happen. And I want
Uh,
you to take it lightheartedly because honestly, nothing is worth it on this planet. Nothing is worth it except your family and your land. So it's
I
fine.
don't.
Even if I joke about it, just take it lightheartedly.
I take the joke like hard. It's black humor, and I get it. I cover war constantly, and so the black humor just kind of comes along with it.
Yes.
But I do take it seriously. It's you
Mhm.
know, it's outrageous that this is allowed,
Mhm.
um, and that this is permitted, and it is even worse that my government and our tax dollars is effectively egging it on. That degenerate, racist trash, Tom, the envoy for Syria, Tom. Oh, what is his
Barak.
last name? Yes,
Barak. He's Lebanese, baby. He's of Lebanese ancestry.
is
This is what
he?
we export to the world. We export our trash and it comes back to our face.
That trash is horrendous as a
Yeah.
degenerate human being. The stuff that he says, like he came out recently and was like, "This is Lebanon's last chance. I'm trying to help." And it's like, no, you're not. You're trying to start a civil war. What are you talking about?
He's
I
just a
mean, guys,
mirror of his commander in chief, so it's
he is.
expected.
But
Thank
Marwa
you.
Osman, she's a journalist, TV show host for Press TV, Middle East Stream, and university lecturer and political commentator. Marwa, you be safe. Thank you very much. You be safe, okay?
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. All right. She is fantastic. And we're going to go from one fantastic guest to another one. The man himself in a sexy shirt, no less, Ted Rall. How you doing, Ted? You doing all right?
Feeling sexy. Too sexy for my cat. If you know that reference.
How you doing, man? You doing all right?
Know that reference. Remember Right
Ted
Says
Rall,
Fred?
political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI with the great, the beautiful, the awesome She Walks on Water, Manila Chan. Also with John Kariakou. And that one is called, I want to say Debrief, but I don't think it's named Debrief.
Deprogram.
Deprogram. That was close. And in fact, let me put that into the thing right now. You and Wilmer, for whatever reason, I could never get that thing. I had to put it into the script for Wilmer, so I'm putting it into the thing for you right now, the program. Mom Donnie, you have a new mayor-elect in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel any different? Has the world changed? Our grocery store is free. A bus is free yet?
The hammer.
No, give me your thoughts on the election, man.
The hammer and sickle bunting everywhere.
Right. They put the flag up of the hammer and sickle all over New York.
Statue of Lenin replaced the Statue of Liberty. I would be all about it, but you know.
Well, they jumped from socialists to communists. They said the guys are communists.
I wish. God, please, from their lips, their fascist lips to God's ears. But it's if only it were so. No, I mean, look, he's a liberal Democrat, like circa 1968. He's Hubert Humphrey. He's John Lindsay. He's, he's George McGovern. I mean, maybe George McGovern was to his left. It's like everything's moved so far to the right on both major parties that, of course, obviously, anything that's not super fascist looks a little socialist. I mean, a democratic socialist is kind of like a meaningless term anyway. We could get into that. But look, this was more to me. Is this meaningfully going to change the life of New Yorkers? Is the rent going to go down? Are groceries going to become half price? No. You don't
think so?
This is going to change the life of the DNC. Is what it's going to do. The DNC's life is about to be made miserable, right? I mean, literally the highest profile quote unquote democratic socialist since Robert La Follette has just been elected to major office by a sweeping landslide. And I won't get into the, what I think is probably chicanery at the Board of Elections regarding Andrew Cuomo's so-called results, where, Andrew Cuomo suddenly goes from 24% the day before the election in the polls to 42%.
Oh, I see.
I don't know about that. I mean,
I see.
And I don't believe for a minute that Curtis Sliwa went from 18 to 8% either. I don't believe Curtis Sliwa didn't carry Staten Island at all. I don't believe that. But anyway, the point is they couldn't really cheat Mamdani out of it. There would have been riots. The city would have burned to the ground. Look, it's obviously, we knew he was going to win. It was a foregone conclusion. He ran away with it months ago. Thanks mainly to his opposition, which was so lame, Eric Adams, and who we've now forgotten about, and Cuomo, who ran an atrocious campaign. And so, look, the thing is, this is a lesson for the DNC. Does this mean that, I walk into a DNC meeting and make a case that this is the model for all Democratic races nationally going forward? No, because it's not true. But it's certainly true that this is the model that should be looked at for major cities and liberal states. This can be replicated in Massachusetts. This can be replicated in Chicago, San Francisco, Miami, Los Angeles. This could be maybe replicated in the entire state of California, although maybe it's a little tough there. So I'm just saying that what this is about is saying the progressive half or 60 or 70% of the Democratic Party voters can no longer be ignored. They will no longer be denied. And the harder you try to force a corporatist down their throats, the more they're going to push back. That's really the issue. Now, in terms of New York City, what has been promised here? In a city of 8 million people, 5 experimental cheap grocery stores. Okay, right. Probably not going to work because the history of government run grocery stores is not promising anywhere in the country or in the world. The free buses, that's a good idea. That can happen.
Yes.
And it should happen. I don't think it's really that meaningful because most New Yorkers rely more on the subway than on the bus. The bus is more the supplement, like you use the subway to get up or downtown, then you take the bus across town, and there's a free transfer. So it's not really putting money into people's pockets. And, we have one of the best subway and bus fares in the country. It's $2.90. And it's non-zonal. So you can go from the far ends of like the Rockaways out by JFK Airport all the way up to the northern Bronx, which is a trip that takes hours for $2.90, right? Compare that to the BART in San Francisco, where that same trip is going to be like from like SFO out to like northern to the northern part reaches of the Bay Area. It's going to be like $20 one way. So it's not going to change people's lives. The rent should have been frozen years ago. It's not been, and I don't know. It's like we'll see what happens there. But even if the rent were frozen, that doesn't really do much.
Still too high.
The average rent of a New York City apartment now is $5,000 a month.
I can't believe that.
For
that number blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like if you're a barista, how do you afford rent?
Well, you live in some shitty area and you share with like 3 people. You live illegally, and the truth is, or you commute a long way. It's not sustainable. I mean, look, the rent has always been too damn high in New York City. I mean, I remember in the 80s, I shared a 2-bedroom apartment. One of us slept in the living room. With 2 other guys, right? So 3 guys sharing a 2-bedroom. One dude slept in the living room. It was a 6th floor walk up in a dangerous neighborhood. I mean, we found 2 guys murdered in the lobby of our building. It was $850 a month. And I earned $283. So my share was $283. My paycheck was $315 every 2 weeks. So one paycheck, poof, gone every month. And that's not counting, the power and, and food and all the necessities. We used to jump the turnstile because we couldn't pay the fare. So, but the point is that how did we do it? If we needed toilet paper, we went to the diner and like went to the bathroom with a backpack and stole the toilet paper out of there. I mean,
Wow.
we were living rough, right? I mean, and we were college educated white dudes, you know. I mean, we had a future. You know, it's like if you're the barista, the future doesn't look bright. By the way, Starbucks is getting ready for a national strike. That's an interesting story too. You know, the baristas are pissed, and they should be. But
yes, they should be.
And it's not. It's so anyway. It is definitely. Look, it's always. I tend to look at a gift horse in the mouth. It's really good that Mamdani won. It's really good that he's still saying all the right things. He's also the way he campaigned is instructive too. He didn't run away from anything controversial, right?
Yes.
It's like, you know, he didn't try to weasel out of his positions on Israel or or being a Muslim or being a democratic socialist. He owned everything. And I think even if you were a little skeptical of, say, his age or his religion or whatever, you know, you had to respect the fact that he's not trying to bullshit you. He's like, this is who I am. The voters really crave authenticity. And yes. I think a lot of people voted for him despite their doubts, possibly, because, you know, they're so hungry for something new. Andrew Cuomo was all about something old. And you know, and that's something old, like I've said to you before. If he'd run in 2021, it was exactly what the doctor ordered, but not by 2025. You know, with the pandemic raging and the chaos in the streets, you know, there was a sense that the city needed a firm hand, law and order. Yes. Now there's still no law and order, but New Yorkers are used to it and they're rolling with the punches. They're looking for like someone who, I mean, they're like, oh God, you know, we could address systemic issues. I didn't know we were allowed to do that. Wow.
And just to back up your point about, because look, I am a firm believer that you hold your shape. If you run, it makes people think that there's a reason that you're running, right? It's like you own it. This is what I am. Take it or leave it. Right. You're much better off, especially for the lefty stuff. It's like, yeah, I'm, you know, we're gonna have free grocery stores. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm planning on. And when they attack him on it, he points out Cuomo paid more for his sexual harassment claims than I am talking about for the grocery store. When you put it in that context, right, you're like, hey, that's a good point, right? Like he owned all of these issues. And this is one of those ones for the Zionist thing. I love this. Listen to this, because you don't really get to see this very often. It's mind-blowing to me that these people thought in the middle of a genocide.
The first foreign visit by a mayor of New York is always considered significant. Where would you go first? Left to right, Ms. Adams.
First visit, I would visit the Holy Land.
Mr. Cuomo?
Given the hostility and the anti-Semitism that has been shown in New York, I would go to Israel.
Mr. Tilson, where would you go?
Yeah, I'd make my 4th trip to Israel, followed by my 5th trip to Ukraine, 2 of our greatest allies fighting on the front lines of the global war on terror.
Mr. Mamdani.
I would stay in New York City. My plans are to address New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs and focus on that.
Mr. Mamdani, can I?
Fantastic answer. And by the way, he gets attacked for that. He gets attacked for that. I am mayor. I am not president. I'm not a senator. I'm not a congressman. I am a mayor of New York City. And if you ask me where I'm going to go, I'm going to stay in New York and deal with the issues associated with New York. Now, you would think that every New Yorker would be like, yeah, well, that's what we want. We want somebody to deal with New York. And yet he gets attacked on stage for that very answer. It's that reason and things like that. That's why he won. And I don't know if Democrats are going to realize it, but that's why he won.
Yeah, I don't think that corporate Democrats are able to replicate that secret sauce, and it's because it's not a secret. But there's an inherent contradiction between being a Democrat, which was theoretically the party of the working man and woman, and being a corporatist, which is those are the people who exploit working men and working women.
Ted, you're speaking my language. I've said the same. I made the same argument that the contradiction is so over the top. How are you getting millions of dollars and you are yet supposed to represent people who are the poor and the middle class and workers? How do those things
You can't.
relate to one another? You can't.
And Bernie Sanders has been talking about that for years. I mean, you look, Bernie's analysis has been spot on, and because it's totally true that, look, the Clintons, what they decided, what they learned and figured was that the Democrats had a funding issue in the 90s. They used to always be outspent by the Republicans.
Yes.
And they were like, well, where do we go? Like Willie Sutton, we're going to go where the money is, with the corporations. And it is a fact, Jamal, if you and I, it's a lot easier for you and I to shake down, one rich dude for $1 million than it is to shake down 100,000 poor dudes for $10, right?
Right.
So it's a lot easier. The problem is that when that dude calls that you got the $1 million from, you better fucking take his call, and you better, you probably better do what he wants.
Right.
And that's exactly what's happened to the Democratic Party. They went with the corporate. They were like, we're going to compete with the Republicans for the big business money. And they didn't have the problem in the 90s, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to this, was that Democrats didn't have an alternative funding mechanism. They didn't know how to do small donations. The internet didn't exist to do that, and unions were falling apart in large part because Republicans had gutted them in the 80s. Yeah. So and that used to be a funding mechanism, and there's no doubt you need money to win campaigns, and it's not even about running ads. It's about crunching data. That's what you really use the money for. The ads, 5% of campaign funding goes to ads. Ads are nothing. It's about slicing and dicing data in a million different ways. Which doors to knock on, which phones to ring, and so on. But that said, this is how they got them. This is the thing about life, right? We've all been through it. You fix one problem, but it causes another, and that's what happened there. And of course, obviously, it didn't hurt for the Clintons and people like them that was their politics. They were corporatists, right? Maybe in her heart of hearts, Hillary Clinton was once a good person, back in the 1970s. Maybe that's possible, but it doesn't matter, because by the time they went this direction, they owned it completely and fully, and I think they started to believe it at a certain point. So it's but Mamdani kind of points away, and look, Bernie Sanders, AOC, they all, for all of their flaws, they all show that a different way is possible. Now, the problem here is that it's within the Democratic Party. And,
right.
You're inside the beast. And,
right.
Just this morning, I heard Mamdani say, like, oh, I talked to the governor-elect of New Jersey, and, we're going to do good things together. And look, the mayor of the city of New York doesn't actually have much to do with New Jersey. The governor of the state of New York has a lot to do with the governor of New Jersey. But I was just thinking the fact that he has to make that call, and it's like, ooh, there's a
it started.
For this.
It begins.
There's a French word for it called l'engrenage, and it's sort of loosely translated like another day, another dollar, but it's like the system. It's the daily grind. It's like,
yeah,
you're in, like Pink Floyd would say, welcome to the machine, right?
Yeah. Now the sausage making begins. Now it begins, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you've done all of this electoral stuff, right? You said everything right. You campaign efficiently. You put a knife in people who needed a knife put in them. You've done all that good stuff. Now it's, all right, how do we do it? How do we make this work?
Yeah.
You make the point of saying, I agree with you. The problem is the DNC and whether or not this is going to be a pain in the ass for the DNC. But is it? I don't think the Democrats looked at this and thought to themselves, all right, I guess we're going to have to go this route. Spangelberger, whatever her name is, won in Virginia. The other rando Democrat won in the other state. And of course, all of the media reports, Democrats turn to the moderate direction because this is the way to win elections. And Mamdani is
what they always say. Like,
I know.
That's
my point.
Could they say anything else ever? Have they? Is it even possible? Are they allowed? It's sort of like the puppet.
That's my point. Like the message that they took from this is Trump's bad, Trump is horrendous, any rando Democrat will win. And that was the policy, that was the model that they went with. If you notice in the very beginning, Democrats weren't saying anything. They were letting Trump be Trump. They burned their entire bridge on this idea of stopping Trump. It failed, and they were like, all right, let's let Trump be horrible. And when he's very horrible, we'll get back into the race. Now, the problem that they ran into is people start screaming at him, why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you fighting? In which case, they got more boisterous in their language. But for all intents and purposes, let Trump be horrible. And when we throw rando Democrat, whatever rando Democrat that is, Spainberger, or the one that won in, I think it was Pennsylvania, maybe. I know they swept the Pennsylvania Supreme Court seats. Apparently, even in Georgia, like Democratic commissioners got into office. And then you look at the numbers, like the scale to which they went. They were beating by like 20 points. And I was looking at the Cuomo race, and I was like, who are these 40% people who want to put this lying sexual abuser into office?
Who doesn't like, who, by the way, openly says that he doesn't like New York City.
Yes. Who does this, right? Who voted for this guy? 40%. And
I don't think they did, really, but yeah.
Right. You think the election was dodgy, but fair enough.
I think the system, the Democratic machine, did not allow for, would not allow a route that basically looked like Sliwa and Cuomo tied for a distant second.
Oh, I see. Like Mondani at 60 and Cuomo and the other guy at 15%.
Yeah, well,
or something like that.
I mean, look, I had sources within the campaign that had internal polling. I called this on Deprogram a couple days before the election. I said it's going to be 52%. It was 51.5%. So, I mean, hey, you can, that was good sourcing. I was very happy that I got that internal polling data, but everything had Cuomo stuck at 24% for months. I mean, and Sliwa was rising, and understandably so. I mean, Sliwa is a really likable, very charming New Yorker who owns 11 cats and lives in a one-bedroom apartment. We love him, even though I don't. I wish he wasn't a Republican. If he wasn't a Republican, he'd be the mayor of New York.
He owns 11 cats for real.
He owns 11 cats in a one-bedroom apartment.
Jesus.
Well, when you have 11 cats, they own you. But
yeah.
You own one cat, they own you. But
I guess my point is they have been like Democrats effectively swept all the elections. And not just swept all the elections, even in California, Proposition 50 passed, which is going to add, 4 or 5?
Well, that's not, I don't know why people are surprised by that. Why was anyone surprised that Prop 50 was going to pass? I mean, were you? I wasn't. I mean,
that was easy.
Of course, it's like Californians are all Democrats. And they're gonna we're gonna get. It's not. This isn't about the power of Gavin Newsom. This is about look at what the Texans are up to. Fuck them. We'll do the same thing.
Exactly. Agreed.
That's all it is.
And then
Californians are very, very savvy voters. I mean, I spent a lot of time in California, and I've always been impressed with their long memories and their careful analysis of the way they vote. And it was like, I mean, I saw this coming a million miles. These are not idiots. They don't vote emotionally at all.
Yep. It's an easy vote. I guess my thing is. My issue with all of this is that Democrats have learned nothing. They've given nothing. Right. They still have no message. Nothing has changed.
Yesterday is going to confirm that for them, right? Because it's just like you said, they're going to be like, well, what was their message, right? They didn't have a unifying message in this past campaign. And by the way, I don't blame them. No one's ever thought of trying to, nationalize an off-year election, right? Like Newt Gingrich did it with a midterm. No one's ever done it with an odd-numbered year. It's not possible, right? Or maybe it is possible, but no one's ever tried. But the point is, so they're going to come out of this and what was the message? The message. Why did people vote that way? They voted that way because they were pissed off at Donald Trump. And the analysis that's come out now from Politico, and I think I said this yesterday morning on the show. It's basically people are pissed off because Trump ran on the economy, and now he's spending all his fucking time blowing up Venezuelans and thinking about whatever invading and sucking up to racist Afrikaners and bringing and just doing all this shit all over the world, I'm gonna bomb Kenya or whatever. I mean, he's not. He took his eye off the ball, which is of course what Donald Trump does. That's his personality, but he lost the script, right? It's like this is an economic period. Nothing's been solved. If anything, it's getting worse. And so the analysis now is Republicans are we've got to try to get the president refocused, and that's how it is. Yeah.
He's a Republican. How? They don't care. It's not like look, I never had this belief that Donald Trump was going to come in and do anything for the economy short of getting massive tax cuts.
No.
And I never understood why people even thought that Trump, a blue-collar billionaire who cares purely about himself and his own enrichment, was going to somehow come in and do something great for the economy. I mean, Donald Trump has military people right now, as we speak, getting food stamps. That's assuming they can even get food stamps since the government is shut down. But in lines at food banks, while having other military people try to attack another country. That's what's taking place.
That's why the troops need to invade Venezuela so they can eat something down there in Caracas.
Right, they can get some good Venezuelan food. And when you ask the American public, they come up with this. Fox News had to run this. And this, Fox News had to spin it a particular way, but ultimately Fox News was stuck with their own poll. Or ABC
so
News
here's
poll.
Americans, they're spending more on basic needs. They're saying they're spending 71% more on groceries, 59% more on utilities, on healthcare, 43%, housing, 39%. So you see people are...
So effectively, Donald Trump has increased the cost of everything that Americans are paying for.
feeling the pinch.
His argument is effectively, hey man, tariffs are giving this country billions of dollars. We are paying those tariffs. So so it's this outrageous position of, hey man, we're making all of this money in tariffs. Look how many billions of dollars we made in tariffs. And it's like, oh, you mean billions of dollars are coming out of Americans' pockets?
Who's this we we're talking about here?
No.
Yeah. I mean, no, that's exactly right. I mean, look, you can, whatever, when presidents always like to point to metrics, like Biden did it. Like, look, things are a lot better than you think. Like, don't believe your lying wallet. Remember, believe me. Like, look at my statistics. And it's like after the fact, it turned out the statistics were, correct, were inaccurately calculated and all that. And they are in the bubble. Donald Trump definitely, look, I have to give him props. He looked out the window of his limousine in 2012 and 13 and 14. And thought as he drove through, the Rust Belt and said, it must suck to live like this. It must suck to see all these boarded up houses and businesses and factories. And, if I talk about it, maybe people will agree with me. And that's how he became president of the United States. That's, so he's actually very smart at analyzing how people will feel about things. What he's terrible at is coming up with policies and following through on them that might address these issues, right? I mean, he recognized the problem of the coal miners, but there probably are solutions to them. I think the solution is mainly a giant national jobs retraining program is what's really needed here. But there's kind of like, or the air conditioning plant, the Carrier plant, like, he identifies the problem. The Lordstown plant in Ohio, 10,000 workers out of work, fucked over. He can talk about it, but he can't do anything about it. And part of the problem is that he is a right-wing Republican, and he's surrounded by right-wing Republican policymakers. And, intrinsically, inherently, right-wing Republicans do not give a shit about anyone other than big business and the wealthy. And they can't even pretend to. It's like, and so the only thing you have left then is like the rising tide, lifts all boats, but the tide's not rising, dude. Right. So that's the problem. I mean, except for the stock market and crypto. But, how many of us are in that?
10% apparently of the entire country. And only, I think it's like 1% of the one, as the higher you get into it, meaning 90% of the country is not involved in any of that stuff. No. That's only a very tiny slice of America that is effectively involved in that stuff. Give me your take on the government shutdown, by the way. It's like I leave and you guys shut the government down. And I'm always impressed that air traffic controllers stay on the jobs.
Sure. Well, they're not, apparently, is the problem.
Right.
Anymore.
Those huge lines that are apparently at the various airports. I don't know why any of them stay on the jobs. All of them should just be like, hey, if the government's not going to work, why should we? And put more pressure on the government in that sense. But they don't do that. They continue to do their jobs. Do you think that Republicans are under pressure now with the election that have taken place? I mean, Donald Trump came out and said, hey, we need to get rid of the filibuster. Okay, well, that's interesting. You're effectively telling them to get rid of the filibuster because it seems like there's some sense that, hey, I need you to get the government back open. This looks bad for me now. And the public has just gone heavy for the Democratic Party. We're going into midterms.
Well, Republicans are learning something that they may not have been familiar with before, which is that perception in politics is far more important than reality. Is it true that this government shutdown is mostly the Democrats' fault? Sure, absolutely. They're refusing to provide like half a dozen votes that would reopen the government, and they're leveraging their desire to renew the Affordable Care Act subsidies in order to do it. But the voters who are working 50 hours a week to try to pay those high prices that you just mentioned, Jamal, they look at it and they say, look, it's very simple. It's a simple analysis. Republicans control everything: the Supreme Court, the White House, both houses of Congress, most elected, high elected offices across the country. You guys run everything. You even have the dominant cable news network. You have everything. So everything that goes wrong is your fault by definition. That's kind of like that's what's going on. So yeah, the pressure is on. The Republicans are getting beaten up in the polls. Donald Trump knows it. They know it. And the thing is, I don't think they really fully appreciated the extent to which Democrats really don't have a choice. I mean, Jamal, here's the thing. Right. The Republicans say, we will talk about the Affordable Care Act subsidies after you decide to pass a clean CR, continuing resolution, and reopen the government. Okay, well, that's a lie. We all know that. No one thinks that the Republicans would be amenable to renewing the subsidies, right? Nobody. Right. So what would happen so let's just say the Democrats go along. They reopen the government. The subsidies go away. The already fragile marketplaces, both the federal and the state ones, they all collapse next year, okay? Because basically 20 million people lose their health care. That also drags down the entire private care system, because that's propped up financially by the by the ACA. But the point is, what is the only major legislative achievement of the Democratic Party since the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson? The ACA. Yep. Does it suck? Yeah, but it's the only thing they've got. So if that goes away, what are they going to be saying? Like, well, we passed the Civil Rights Act? I mean, back when I was 1 year old and I'm 62, like, really? I mean, they literally would be like committing political suicide. They would have nothing to point to. They would have accomplished nothing. There would be no reason for that party to even exist. For Democrats, it's existential. They have to hold the line. And I don't think, I think Republicans are used to pushing, and just being, abusive all the time. And they think that, like, if they keep acting like bullies, the Democrats will roll. Well, they always have, but they can't this time. So because they can't, they won't. If they could, they'd figure out a way, but they can't. So the Republicans are feeling the heat. They're going to have to blink. Everything's falling apart, man. I mean, like, a lot of people are not going to get any food stamps this month at all. Some are going to get a fraction of. People are going to be on TV like, I'm hungry, my kid's hungry. It's already started. That there's tomorrow, the aviation system is going to start to implode. Okay, you can't cancel 10% of flights you can cancel 10% of flights, and then, okay, what happens to all those fucking people? You and I both know, like, if 10% of flights are canceled due to a series of thunderstorms going through one part of the country, it ripples through the system. Everybody who's changing flights is stuck overnight. They're 5-hour waits. They miss their connections. Everything falls apart. 10% isn't 10%. 10% is 50%. 20% is 100%. So, I mean, because the whole thing is tied together with duct tape and baling wire. So that falls apart. And then you've got the the Affordable Care Act subsidies. People are getting those bills like, oh yeah, you were paying $280 a month. Now it's going to be $1,200 a month. People are like, what the fuck? I mean, we're used to higher prices. We're not used to prices like that. I mean, there's nothing. Everything's coming up Democrat these days, or maybe more accurately, everything's coming up not Republican.
Isn't that necessary? This sounds very brutal, and I don't even know if I fully believe this. But does this country need a wake-up call?
Yes.
And what I mean is, like, it's like, dude, Affordable Care Act sucks. I understand that it's the best that you got, so it's the life raft that you hold on to. But, if you're in another country, you pay much less for healthcare, especially if there's some kind of government model that's built into the healthcare. And let's be honest, the Affordable Care Act is just a middleman that is completely unnecessary. It is a middleman that just drives up costs. And yet, that is the life preserver that people hold on to because, for all intents and purposes, it's the only life preserver that they have available to them. But it's a sucky life preserver. Like, meaning, is this a situation where, well, the airlines need to implode? The Affordable Care Act or the healthcare system needs to implode. Social Security needs to stop sending checks. SNAP benefits need to stop. Meaning, the public needs to be royally pissed. And I mean pissed at both political parties for the failings of both political parties. And the government being shut down and not being able to function as a result of both political parties. Maybe that's necessary in order for anything real to take place in regards to the public that finally loses, stop being anesthetized and gets more engaged in being
I hate
angry.
it. I mean, I hate it. It's like, I think it's ridiculous. But, people have a tendency not to do anything about major pressing problems until, the rent is due and they can't pay it.
Right.
They could see like 2 months ahead of time that the rent is due and they're not going to be able to pay it, but that's different. It's just the way we're wired psychologically. I suspect probably it goes back to the fact that we were hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers don't store food, right? They basically they wait till they're hungry. It's like an animal, like a predator, like a tiger, a cat has to be hungry really to have a more successful rate of killing. And like it's just an animal thing. We have to be desperate. We have to, Che Guevara said that as long as the existing system, no matter how shitty it was there was some hope that it could deliver, people were not going to rise up and overthrow it. That hope, so you have to introduce a sense of total desperation and hopelessness in order to get people to really wake up. It sucks. I mean, as a humanist, I can't stand it. I mean, when people are, going hungry or suffering needlessly. But it's the reality of our politics.
Yeah, that sucks. I mean, do you see anything changing on that front? And this could be the last question. Like, do you see the government opening? Do you see Republicans yielding to the pressure that's being applied?
They're going to have to. They're going to have to come.
I think so.
They're going to have to come to Jesus, and I don't know. It's hard to say when. I'm going to say, but I'm pretty good at this. I'm going to say about 10 days. They're going to wake the fuck up. By November 15th, they're going to fucking cave, and they're going to renew those subsidies.
Now, just to be clear though, I thought the subsidies has already lapsed. That the bills are already.
They've lapsed. They're going to have to go back retroactively, and figure out a way to get those into people's pockets. They're going to have to.
And you think they're going to do that?
They have
something they don't care about.
They have to. If they don't, it's like the country's going to start to fall apart. I mean, I guess that could happen too. I mean, that's possible. Political suicide is always an option, but not a good one. I mean, I guess I'm giving Republicans credit for not being that fucking stupid, but that could happen.
10 days. Ted Rall. He put it on there. He said, "I'm good at this. 10 days. I'm gonna hold you to 10 days, Ted."
We'll see. It could be longer. Could be shorter. But yeah, that's if I had to put money on it. That's where I'm putting it.
Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, co-host of TMI with the awesome Manila Chan, and also Deprogram with the great John Kiriakou. Ted, thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay?
All right, you too. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Ted has given his 10 days, as he puts it. I'm writing it down. Ted Rall says 10 days for the government to reopen. This is already the longest government shutdown. Professor Wolff did a video talking about the real reason why the government is shut down. And so we are going to get his take on this in about 10, 15 minutes when he comes on. Ted is awesome. I love Ted to death. And we always have these really good conversations. I usually talk to Ted about domestic politics because obviously he's in the States and this is something that he watches and covers all the time. And so shout out to Ted Rall for his political analysis. We will see what Mandani does. I don't get the sense that the Democratic Party has learned anything. I think from their point of view, Trump's bad. We can effectively live off that, so we can go another political go around with the whole idea of Trump bad, vote us in. We'll see. Before I get to Professor Wolff, well, first, I want to give a shout out to the audience, to the chat. If you guys dig the content, like, share, subscribe. You can support this content, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat. I often forget to do that in the middle of the show because we are effectively doing the show, and my mind is usually focused on trying to have the show to be proficient. But you can support this content, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Super Stickers, etc., etc., etc. Also, like the show, share the show. I would like to get a producer. Right now, I cannot afford a producer, so the show needs to continuously grow before I get to that particular point. I've been in conversations with one woman who's very nice, very good, seemingly, anyway, at her job. You never know until the person gets on the job. But the show needs to continue to grow in order for me to do that. So I'm putting that out there into the universe. But at the very least, hit the like button if you are indeed digging the content. There is something that bubbled up recently from TASS. TASS came out with this report. It fascinated me. Honestly, the guy, it did. Russia sticks to approach to Ukraine unveiled in Alaska. This is according to a diplomatic source. It says, let me be clear. The Russian side maintains a regular dialogue with Americans on the subject of the Ukraine settlement. And just to read a bit of this, Ukraine-themed contact between Russia, and by the way, this is in the face of Financial Times, who's been reporting contrary information. Financial Times make the point of saying, well, look, the Russians wouldn't budge from their positions, and they reiterated their memorandum. And so, there was no point in us going to Budapest. Now, it was Trump that brought up the Budapest summit. It was Trump that came out with the whole Tomahawk threat and then backed away from the Tomahawk threat. It was Trump that offered a deal. It was Witkoff was effectively sent to Moscow, had a conversation with Putin, offered an agreement or offered a deal. The Russians, Putin, when he came to Alaska, apparently accepted that deal with certain modifications associated with it and was waiting for the U.S. to respond to the general acceptance of the deal that Witkoff put forward. That's the reality of events. You don't have to take my word for it. Go back and watch the Alaska summit when Trump and Putin came out and gave their speech. And both pointed out that there was some kind of deal that was being discussed or talked about, meaning both of them introduced this idea that there was a deal on the table. They were very clear about it if you listen to the speech that both of them gave after the meeting. So right here, Ukraine-themed contacts between Russia and Ukraine have not been interrupted, and Moscow has not deviated from the understandings reached for the Alaska summit, a diplomatic source in Moscow has told TASS. The source said that lately, quote, paid-up reports, unquote, they talk about Financial Times, they're under a paywall, started to emerge in the media sphere containing variants of the idea that Russia-U.S. contacts, quote, have hampered the process of preparations of the Russia-U.S. summit and, in general, delayed solutions to the, quote, Ukraine crisis, unquote. Quote, let me be clear. The Russian side maintains regular dialogue with Americans on the subject of the Ukraine settlement. The contacts have not ceased, unquote, he said. Quote, at the same time, it should be noted that neither before October 20th phone call between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary Marco Rubio, nor after this conversation, the Russian side went beyond the understandings reached by the Russians and U.S. leaders during the detailed exchange of opinions on the Ukrainian crisis during the Alaska summit. Basically, effectively, what they're saying is, look, we didn't change our point of view. We never deviated. That we came to some kind of agreement, generally, when we were having those conversations in Alaska between Putin and Trump. We stuck to that understanding and that framework. We continue to stick to that understanding and that framework. And when Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov talked, there was no deviation from that understanding and that framework, whatever that was. All of the conversation that is coming out of Financial Times, that is being leaked from the White House, which is obviously being leaked from the White House, it's coming up with something different. And they're acting as if our position is somehow deviated or changed. It is not. What has changed in it is the Trump position, where if you've noticed, Donald Trump initially from the Alaska thing was like, hey, we need to get a deal that deals with the main issues. And we need to get an overarching deal, not a ceasefire. Then Trump backtracked and said, well, we need a ceasefire. Okay, that's not us deviating. That's not us changing. That is the Trump administration that has effectively blown off whatever the agreement and whatever we talked about and has strung us along in these negotiations. Now, they're not saying that strongly. I'm putting it more strongly, but I'm just putting it as the reality for what it is. Let's keep going. It says earlier, Financial Times reported that the United States had allegedly canceled the planned summit in Budapest between Putin and Trump after Moscow sent a memorandum on Ukraine. The newspaper also alleged that the conversation between Lavrov and Marco Rubio regarding the summit's preparation was, quote, tense. Lavrov and Rubio had a telephone conversation on October 20th. According to the Russian ministry, quote, possible concrete steps were discussed in the interest of implementing the understandings, unquote, that were reached in the telephone conversation between the presidents. Lavrov drew attention to the message from the State Department, which said that the conversation between Rubio was productive and that, at the moment, there was no need for a meeting between Foreign Minister Lavrov, between Secretary of State and Lavrov. They concluded, quote, the conversation went well, indeed. Now, Foreign Financial Times is effectively saying something very different from this. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the Russian side accepted whatever the Trump side came up with various modifications. And it sounds like the deal was ending of the conflict, no NATO, Russia gets the territories to which it had taken and put part of the Russian Federation with some kind of modifications in regards to territorial, let's say, talks. Okay, that's been blown off. Now, the Trump administration not just blew it off, turned around and said, we are now going to pass sanctions. Now, as I've made this argument many times before, the Trump administration is looking for leverage. They're looking for leverage in order to get a deal on U.S. terms. Up to this point, the fact that they're looking for leverage, by definition, means that they don't have leverage. And that the things that they've been trying to do to get leverage, such as attacking oil, for example, in Russia, basically using Ukraine as a battering ram to go after the Russian oil industry, trying to get India to stop using Russian oil, trying to get China to stop using Russian oil. Well, China, in that conversation, Trump didn't even bring it up because for all intents and purposes, Trump got folded by Xi Jinping in that meeting and had to entirely backtrack. You're dealing with a peer. Because you're dealing with a peer, you're not going to engage us in any other way other than dealing with us as a peer. In which case, China remains a hard ass in regards to the minerals, and it has U.S. balls. The Russian government has done any and everything in their power to get a deal. They seem to, on some level, believe Trump when Trump was running as the president who was going to end the war. They took him up on that offer to, quote, end the war. But the problem is, I think as Mark puts it, can a U.S. president accept a surrender? Meaning, can the United States, with all the hubris, with all this belief of being a hegemon, with all this idea of primacy and being everywhere around the globe and being able to effectively do anything and effectuate its will in one location after the next, well, obviously it couldn't do it with China. And obviously it's not able to do it militarily on the ground in Ukraine. But the Russian government is engaging the U.S. government under this idea of, we want a deal. Now, I've made the argument that Putin is chasing safety. And from Putin's perspective, maybe getting a deal is that level of safety. My point of view is, how do you trust the United States? How? China came up with terms of a deal with the U.S., and the U.S. violated it almost immediately, which is the reason why China ended up in the situation where it had to, let's say, put more stringent restraints of pulling a chain in order to get Trump to effectively back down. The U.S. is not engaging China as a peer because it wants to. It's engaging China as a peer because it has to. It has no other choice but to do so. The pain of not doing so will be so great that is effectively forced them into a position of acknowledging equality. With the Russia position being so pragmatic, the U.S. doesn't seem that it needs to do that. The U.S. has decided, and Europe, that it can hit Russia without Russia responding directly to Europe or to the United States. Now, Russia will put out threats, of course. Hey, look at our new missiles. Look at our doomsday weapons. Look at our invincible weapons. But you're not using those invincible weapons. And even when the Orezhnik was used as a test case. Hey, look at what we could do. What you could do is different than giving the perspective of what you will do. Those are two very different things. It's not that I'm criticizing, I don't think, at least I'm not trying to. I'm trying to make the point that pragmatism is not accepted as pragmatism. It's only accepted as weakness. And this is something that Iran had to hit his head on, where it thought it could make a deal with a monster. It's like, hey, I know you have blood dripping from your fangs, but let's make a deal. Let's make an agreement. You can't make an agreement with the U.S. under these terms. You just can't. And any agreement that you make will immediately be violated. I'm not taking this out of nowhere. Look at China and the way that was violated almost immediately. Look at the deal that Trump made with Hamas when he first got into office, and it violated immediately. Look at the deal with Iran, or at the very least the negotiations that were taking place with Iran, violated immediately. How do you make a deal with somebody who believes that they don't need to agree with you or deal with you on equal and honest terms? You don't. Now, to be fair, this hasn't necessarily stopped or hampered what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. And I suppose on some level, they know that, which is the reason why they've been effectively continuing to push and push and push in Ukraine. So regardless of whatever deal that they continue to look out and keep arguing for and insisting upon in the open, saying, look, we haven't changed our point of view. We are open to what is taking place on the Alaska summit, effectively something like an Istanbul agreement with modifications to the Istanbul agreement. We are continuing our military campaign. I suspect that what the Russians are thinking and what they know is that, look, we are going to continue to push on the ground. We are going to take the Donbass. We're going to do it. Cross will fall. Kupiansk will fall. Seversk will fall. And when Kramatorsk is the last location, it will be surrounded and it will fall. And when the Donbass is effectively taken, will the U.S. take a different tact? Will they take a different point of view? Now, the problem with this angle is, as I keep pointing back, there's no feedback mechanism. There is no pain that is inflicted upon the United States for beating Ukraine. Me punching Bob doesn't necessarily make Tom care about the fact that Bob is being punched, especially if what the objective is to overextend Russia. Meaning, part and parcel to the reason that the Europeans and that the United States continue to allow this war to take place and allow this war to keep going, despite the fact that it's clear as day that Ukraine is losing more territory, Ukraine is losing manpower, Ukraine's military is withering away. Every syllable that comes out of my mouth, the withering gets worse. The cauldrons that are in Kupiansk and that are in Pokrovsk are tightening every day, that much more so, meaning the capability of Ukrainians to get out of that location is less and less and less, where unless they surrender, more are going to die in this kind of mass killing that is going to take place in those regions. It's because, as I keep pointing out, Europe and the US don't care. This is not a situation of European soldiers being killed in mass. This is not a situation where American flag-draped coffins are coming back to the United States, in which case the Americans get very angry at the government for all of these people dying. That's not what we're dealing with. What we're dealing with is a proxy that is getting taken apart, and it's understood that it's getting taken apart, but they don't care that it's being taken apart, because from the perspective of Europe and perspective of the US, those are Ukrainians. Those are not Europeans and Americans. If the main objective And I think the way that people are looking at this is wrong. They're looking at this as if, well, Donald Trump really wants a deal. Well, maybe, but he wants it on U.S. terms, which will be at the expense of Russia and the fact that Russia effectively won the war. What Russia wants is to demonstrate we won. We won. And we won in a way that you know it in your bones, that even the Nazis at 3 a.m. between them and their God knows that we won. And we won in a way where most likely the government of Ukraine would have to fundamentally change. Now, if the goal of Europe and the goal of America is to overextend Russia, then there is no incentive for either of these parties to come to a deal or come to an agreement. Regardless of what the president wants, everybody around Trump that Trump hired is not in the business of trying to get a deal or an agreement. And so people are looking at this like, well, God, man, all of these people are dying. All of these people are being surrounded. They never surrender. They effectively stand and die because the government tells them to stand and die. The Donbass is about to fall. Ukraine doesn't really have defenses beyond the Donbass region. Obviously, the Russians are going to be able to move faster the further they get into Donbass and the further or the more that these areas, let's say strong points, collapse. Do you think that Europe is unaware of that? Do you think that America is unaware of that? It is possible that nobody gave Trump a coloring book that explains it to him, but the people around Trump know it, and for that matter, the Europeans know it. I'm saying that the issue has less to do with whether Ukraine is winning or losing. The issue is that the main objective is to overextend the Russian state and to get them to effectively get further and further into Ukraine. I would imagine from the European perspective, from the US perspective, the highest accomplishment of that objective is if Russia has to call up 2 million people in order to occupy all of Ukraine. Obviously, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. People are trying to explain, well, they're obviously losing. Why don't they come to terms? Why don't they come to an agreement? Why don't they come to a deal? And I think the rationale for it is that if you're looking at it in this context of where they're losing and rational actors in a losing war comes to a deal, and it's the U.S. that effectively was the main purveyor of this war with the overthrow of the Ukrainian state back in 2014, getting rid of the Yanukovych government. This was kind of the initiator for all of this. That it would be the U.S. that would make negotiations for some kind of agreement. I think the people who are screaming that the Europeans are keeping this war going, I think they're missing the boat. Donald Trump was able to effectively break Europe with the trade war by threatening tariffs and still able to get Europe to pay ridiculous tariffs, not to mention the investment of money into gas, oil that they're going to pay 3-4 times higher, and for that matter, buying all of these weapons. Europe has decided that they're not going to a conference in South America because they don't want to piss off Donald Trump. So how is this weak vassal union of Europeans the main purveyor and keeping the war going when in every other context they effectively bend the knee to whatever Donald Trump wants? How are people making this argument that Europe is somehow the thing that is the fly in the ointment when for all intents and purposes in every other context Donald Trump has been able to fold Europe around his finger? I don't buy the premise. From my point of view, the main objective in the beginning, overextend Russia, has not changed. That policy is still being enacted. And you can see that policy if you're looking at it through that context, if you're looking at it through that lens. Then why don't they surrender? Overextend Russia is the point, not for Ukraine to win. Hey, Russia's going to take all of Donbass. Yes, they are. Will Russia move on Kiev? Maybe. Will Russia have to take the western part of Ukraine in order to ensure that that area is not necessarily used as a new NATO base for Ukraine to all of a sudden launch some kind of campaign later on? Maybe. Is it in Russia's best interest to do so? Irrelevant. Obviously, part and parcel to the reason that Putin wants a deal is because he doesn't want to do that. But also, from the standpoint of the Europeans and Americans, maybe that is exactly what they want to take place. If Russia is in a guerrilla war for the next 10 years, does that fulfill the objective of overextending Russia? I get that's cynical. I get it. And yet, if you are constructing a reality based upon the information that you have at your disposal and the way that things are effectively functioning, does it come across to be more true than not? And I guess my point of view is it is more true than not. That is the reality that we're effectively seeing. Yes, the Russians most likely want a deal. Yes, all things being equal, Putin probably does want to end the war. Again, from my point of view, Putin is chasing safety, not just for now, but for the foreseeable future. No, they obviously don't want a third world war. And no, they probably don't want to take over Western Ukraine. But if you're stuck with people effectively continuously saying no to the demands that you're putting out, and the demands are infinitely reasonable in the context of you winning a war, then what are you stuck with? What are you stuck with? Again, I point out I could be wrong. I don't think I am. And of course, Zelensky, when faced with utter and entire failure, is completely in delusion. He is completely in delusion. Zelensky denies that Russia are making gains in Pokrovsk. Now, Putin is so confident about the noose that's around the throat of the Ukrainian military in Pokrovsk that he has invited media to go and take a look for themselves to see how tight that noose actually is. Zelensky is claiming, right here, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has rejected Russian claims that Moscow forces are advancing on several parts of the front in eastern Ukraine. Zelensky said that Russian forces, quote, have not had any success, unquote, in the beleaguered city of Pokrovsk in recent days. Nonsense. Russia's taken like 80% of Pokrovsk. This is complete fantasy and delusion. My guest this year, I can see him in the background. My man.
How you doing?
Wolff. How you doing? You doing all right today?
Yes, I am, and glad to be talking with you.
And I am glad to be talking with you, Professor D. Wolff. He is Professor of Economics Emeritus in the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a visiting professor in the Graduates Program International Affairs of New School University in New York City. He is founder of Democracy at Work and host of the nationally syndicated show Economic Update. His latest book is System is the Sickness When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. And it is available with his other books, Understanding Socialism and Understanding Marxism, at democracyatwork.info. Professor, I always say that you have shaped my workable point of view, and I am deeply appreciative of you to my last day for doing so. You did a video where you hit and was talking about the shutdown, and effectively was making a point of saying that people are getting the shutdown wrong, that the real rationale for the shutdown is something else. And I want you to go into that. Why are we, 35 days, give or take, into a shutdown that seems to be going on for the foreseeable future, because it doesn't necessarily seem like there's a huge amount of momentum in opening the government back up? Why is this taking place?
Well, we have given over our government for some time now to a group of specialized folks, for lack of a better term, I'll call them politicians. They've organized themselves, as we all know, into two clubs, Republicans and Democrats, and they play a kind of game of musical chairs to run the government. For a few years, one of them sits in office and the other one are out. And then we have a little ritual. We go to vote. And then the other ones who are out come in, and the ones who are in go out. And it's all very polite. And it's usually all very smooth, let's call it. We're all supposed to make believe that something important has happened. The mass media hype this game as if it were serious politics. It never was, and it isn't now. A majority of Americans in most elections don't participate. And that's not because they are bad people or don't care about democracy or any of that stuff. The majority of people who don't go and vote in most elections don't do it because they believe, and by the way, I believe that they are largely correct, that it doesn't make a very large difference. Now, in my mind, because it makes some difference, you might as well do it. So I vote, and I urge other people to vote. But I understand and sympathize with the vast majority who understand that it may make some difference, but it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. And if you really want basic change, which I think most Americans do, well, then there's no point in participating, because you're not going to get basic change, neither from the Republicans nor from the Democrats. Having said that, sooner or later, history catches up, and we get to a level of problems that are so severe and so deep and have been accumulating for so long that you really need action. You need change. But these two political parties, that's not what they're about. They're not going to do change. Oh, they'll tell you that. Vote for me. I'm bringing change. But as we've all learned, the majority of people don't vote because they've been down that road, and they know that what the politicians say and promise can and usually is very different from what they finally do. But we are at a different point in American history now. We are an empire that's going down. We've not been there before. The United States is a young country. From the time of the Revolutionary War at the end of the 18th century to 2015, we were going up, getting richer, getting bigger, getting more productive. Of course, we had our problems along the way, but the trajectory, the route was up. We got used to that. We developed this idea of American exceptionalism, like, God liked us better than everybody else, or some stuff like that. But we are in a very different situation now. We're in a situation that every empire in the history of the world has faced. After you go up, then you go down. That's why we don't have the Roman Empire anymore, or the Greek Empire, or to be more recent, the British Empire, of which the U.S. was once a part. So we had a century. And then around 2015, roughly 10 years ago, we peaked. And now we are at a place that is very different. The place, the time of economic and political decline. And that presents you with enormous problems. But you can control those, you can navigate those, you can work with those, but you have to admit that you've got them before you can ever solve them. And we don't have that. We have two political parties that are up there going rah, rah, rah after the team has lost the game. And it's looking ridiculous in the whole rest of the world. The rest of the world keeps saying, it's over, Jack. Get used to it. Oh, no. We're the greatest. We're the great. It never stops.
Yeah.
And it goes from boasting to becoming ridiculous. So let me give you an example. Mr. Trump discovers, like everybody else, that the United States over the last 30 years has been living on debt. I don't mean households. They've been doing it too. And I don't mean corporations. They've been doing it too. I mean the government. It wasn't that long ago that we counted our national debt in billions. Now we count it in trillions of dollars. That's how the government keeps going. It doesn't raise taxes on corporations and the rich because it's afraid that those people won't then give the politician the money they need to run for office. Don't touch corporations and the rich. Let me remind everyone, the first thing Mr. Trump did after January 20th, when he became president, was what he called the big, beautiful tax bill. Of course, the first thing you do is give corporations and the rich a big, fat tax cut.
Yep.
That's how you show them, don't worry, I'm not going to change anything you got to worry about. And then what was the second thing he did? He's trying to do something about the government's debt. But he's not going to do it by whacking corporations and the rich, for example, by raising their taxes. Oh, no. What he's going to do is stick it to the mass of the people. He's going to save money by saying, what do I need a Department of Education for? What do I need foreign aid to other countries for? Why do I have to worry about all those air traffic controllers? Let the airplane be late. Who cares? I only mention that because yesterday the Secretary of Transportation announced flight cancellations and delays at 40 airports across the United States to take account of just one little corner of what he did. Anyway, look at the theater he used, Jamar. First, we had Elon Musk with government efficiency. Under the game of efficiency, he fired huge numbers of people, closed down programs, stopped giving money to universities to do cancer research, all the stuff we saw in the newspaper. And as soon as that was exhausted, they came up with a new one. Shut the government down. Ostensibly, Mr. Trump wanted to get that part of the bill through that would take away health care coverage for millions and millions of Americans who have no other way to pay for their medical bills.
Yep.
And the Democrats, who look like nothing as they sit there like deer caught in the headlights of a car, they don't do anything, mumble and bumble about things that don't matter. They decide finally, when their pollsters give them the results, you better do something. You look like nothing. So they decided, we'll make our stand here, and we won't sign a bill that takes away medical care. You've already signed half a dozen other things that are even worse. But okay, it's better than nothing. So we've got a stuck government. No government. The Democrats won't sign off. Republicans won't let go. And so we have, over a month now of a shutdown government. Let me drive home one point that people are not perhaps thinking about. This is a sign, government shutting down, to every other country in the world and to every large corporation in the world, including Americans, that this is a bad place to do business.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know if you're a big business and you want your vice president to fly to Chicago to do an important deal. He has to sit in the airplane for an extra hour because his airplane can't get to Chicago. This is craziness. He doesn't know from one day to the next whether his workers are going to get sick and having no health insurance come to work anyway.
Yeah.
And make everybody else sick because you can't take a day off, which everybody who understands medical care knows is why you have to give everybody medical care, because if you don't, then you're basically taking it away from everybody. Half a brain is all you need, but these people lack even that. They are playing their games. They're trying to do the show. Let me... Well, I don't want to overshoot the point. The rest of the world is saying to itself, don't do business in the United States. It's an unstable society. You don't know. If you're going to make an investment of a lot of money in a country like this, well, you're depending on the roads have to work and the schools have to work and the airplanes have to work, but you can't assume that anymore. The the smooth functioning of this society was one of the major reasons why the dollar was the global currency, because it was the currency of the big, rich, stable society. Not anymore. We're not stable. We're unstable. Look, the largest city in the country, New York, just elected overwhelmingly a socialist to be the mayor. You want a sign that America is changing? Bingo, there it is. If it were the only sign, then we would say, well, flash in the pan. But it isn't. 2016, Bernie stands up, says, I'm a socialist. Everybody says, well, he'll get no votes. He got millions of them.
Right.
A couple of years later, people like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez do the same thing. Bingo. She doesn't just do well, she wins. And now we have Zoran Mamdani, who tells you this is not a passing phenomena. The thing that's remarkable is not only that he won, but he won by a lot.
He dominated.
You know, he got over half the vote. You know what that means? He got more votes than all the other candidates combined. And it wasn't just Mario Cuomo and Sliwa. There were 3 or 4 other candidates running for mayor. He got more votes than all of them combined. This was a vote in which a million people inside New York City, half the vote, went for a socialist. And a socialist who's also a Muslim. Think of what this country has said about or done to Muslims. For those who don't know, when you go to war in Afghanistan, you're making war on Muslims. Right. If you go to war in Iraq, you're making war on Muslims. The whole world sees it in that way. Yet Americans, despite everything bad said about Muslims, said, we don't care about that. You know what? We want change. And Curtis Sliwa is a candidate who's been here for 8 million years. And Mario Cuomo, we've had him. Thank you. No more. We want change. And they went and they voted for change.
They did vote for change. No, I agree with you. They did vote for change. But are they going to get that change? And does the political system in this country, because look, I am of mind that we have a capitalistic economic system that eats the democratic system in the way that the country operates.
Yep.
And if you're looking at the federal level, I mean, the shutdown is a really good example of this. You have 2 political parties that effectively get nothing done. And it's almost like a game that they play where each side knows that the other side is bad. And so it's a ping pong where the American public sloshes back and forth with what the public wants, not factoring into our political affairs. And so.
No, absolutely. I'm just nodding in agreement. I think you're describing it exactly the way it is.
How do you get something done in a political system like that? And, somebody made this argument once before that even if you elect a socialist, let's say if Sanders gets elected, I think it was Chris Hedges, that inevitably you run up to a rail that in order to get anything accomplished, it's the economic system that you would ultimately need to fundamentally change. It is hard for a mayor to do that, let alone for president or let alone for Congress. How does that change in our political affairs? It seems like our politics just doesn't work.
Let me answer. The best answer I can give you is drawn out of American history. And I'm going to go back to the last time capitalism really collapsed, the 1930s, the Great Depression, a little less than 100 years ago. What happened? Stock market crashed in October of 1929. The economy starts going down, down. And instead of turning up after 6 months or a year and a half, it doesn't. It keeps on going down and becomes the worst unemployment in American history. I want to remind people, In 1933, when it peaked, official unemployment rate was 25%. Okay? That's 5 times or 6 times what it is today. 25% means 1 out of 4 workers out of work. It means, therefore, that every single American family at that time had somebody, mama, papa, uncle, aunt, son, daughter, out of work. And there was no unemployment in those days. So it meant if anyone in your family was unemployed, everybody else in the family had to share their income to pay for the food and keep the family going.
Yeah.
And many families collapsed. Those who know American history, John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath, it's about the family that disintegrates because it can't navigate this situation. Okay. 1932 is an election. The Republican, Mr. Hoover, who's in office when the Depression starts, is blown away. He's replaced by a Democrat, but a very centrist Democrat. A Democrat like Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries or Kamala Harris or Clinton or all of them. That's what he is. He ran in 1932 on a balanced budget. The government shouldn't spend more money than it takes in taxes. But then something remarkable happened. The mass of people, the American working class, went sharply to the left politically. They joined 2 big socialist parties that became enormous, much larger then than the DSA of Mr. Mamdani is today. And they also joined another party which barely exists today, which was called the American Communist Party. And they all worked together with the CIO, the labor union movement, and they took the country to the left. And they went to Mr. Roosevelt, the president, and they said, you've got to do really big things of a sort this country has never seen, because we don't want to suffer through this depression, and we are the majority. If you do it for us and with us, we'll make you the greatest president this country ever saw. But if you don't, you won't be the dog catcher next year. That's what they told him. And Mr. Roosevelt was a realistic politician. He understood they had the people. They had organized millions of people in the labor unions who had never been in them before. They had these big political parties. If you go back, and which I've done, you look at newspapers. Every day there was a story in the front page of New York City newspapers about a demonstration in this part of town or a demonstration. The workers were marching every day. And so Mr. Roosevelt did a U-turn. He started spending money like you never saw. And what did we get? For those people who think you can't get a solution, we got the Social Security system. Yeah. In the midst of a depression, when the government had no money, the workers made sure this president pushed through Congress the creation of a system that when you get to be 65 years of age or older, the government gives you a check every month. Period. End of conversation. You don't have to work for that check anymore. You've given a lifetime. It is a sign of respect that you've done that, and we're not going to make you, scrubbing around garbage cans when you're an old person to get by. So he did that. Then he did the unemployment compensation. All of these things were done in the 1930s when the government had no money. The first minimum wage, 1938. The first government hiring program on a mass scale, 15 million unemployed people hired by the government. So they would have a decent job, they would have a secure income, they could pay for their, rent or their mortgage or whatever they had. Those things were accomplished. And you know how the government that had no money paid for them? Roosevelt went to the corporations and the rich, and he said to them, "You've got to give me the money to take care of the American people." And I warn you, he said, I warn you, if you don't give me the money, they're going to come and you're not going to have any money to give anybody.
Now, to be fair, Roosevelt was living in the wake of the Russian Revolution, which he remembered.
Everybody remembered it.
Exactly, which was, it was like that was only what 10 years or a few years before
that's right
that had taken place.
And believe me, he made jokes about it. He said, they'll be coming with the pitchforks. The imagery was in everyone's mind, what you just said.
What I'm getting at, though, is the Soviet Union has collapsed. At the time, I think Roosevelt had taxes at 90% on the rich for everything up to like $1 million.
Yep.
Do you see that renaissance taking place in the U.S.? I obviously I can't see around corners. These people seem different. These people seem far more, let's say, hardened in their position. I don't know if you've ever read Peter Turchin's book, End Times. It feels like that. Like they've gotten to the point where that level of rejuvenation seems almost unforeseeable in our current politics.
But in the Russian Revolution, which I have studied, one of the great books written about the Russian Revolution was a book written by an American journalist named John Reed, R-E-E-D.
I've read that book.
And the book was entitled 10 Days That Shook the World.
Yes.
That was the name of the book. And one of it's a book everybody should read because it's sort of a naive American young journalist, kind of eyes wide watching all of this.
Right.
But there's a line in there that he's standing on a street, I think in Moscow or Leningrad, I don't remember which. And he says, there's a revolution going on, but passing in front of me are the coaches taking the rich people to the opera. He said, they see the soldiers in the streets who are making a revolution, and they wave because they think it's a parade. In other words, he's telling us that the people who ran Russian society, the aristocracy, the rich, all of that, they had no clue of what's going on. None. It's as if you lived in a house where the people who live on the first floor don't really understand what the basement is. And that there's a lot of people in that basement. And they're the ones that make the food you eat and, make the bed you sleep in and all the rest of it. That's part of what you're feeling and what we're all feeling, because that is happening again. I wouldn't be surprised if we do have a new form of what we had in the 1930s, but this time with a different outcome, because in the 1930s, we were on the way up in an empire, and that's what saved us. Now we don't have that. Now the rising economic empire is China, and they're not our friend, and because we are not their friend. So this is a completely different circumstance within which this stuff is playing out. But I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think they have any clue. Let me give you an example because it struck me so hard. I happened to be told by a friend, listen, I want to read to you, he said, the tweet put out by Kamala Harris yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. All right. The tweet is all about Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was a former vice president. He died either yesterday or the day before. Yep. And so she writes a thing, what a great man he was, what a great leader. He will be missed. One of those very polite, if it weren't him, you wouldn't, that's a nice thing. One person recognizes the death of another. The day Mamdani won, she didn't say anything. She didn't endorse him. She commented on what a great man Dick Cheney. It takes your breath away. That's like John Reed waving to the lady in the opera coach because she has no clue. He doesn't want to upset her. Go to the opera, have a nice time. I'm making a revolution over here. And the revolution won, and the people who went to the operas left the country. I mean, so it had the different outcome. If you're asking me, is something similar possible here? I'll go further, Jamal. I think something similar is already underway here. I think that's what you saw in New York City. I live in Manhattan. I voted in that election. I live in an apartment building on the 9th floor, right? I talk to people in the elevator every day going up and down in my building, like millions of other New Yorkers. And all I can tell you is for months now, I haven't been able to believe what we talk about in the elevator. People want change. They look around, they say, this can't go on. This can't go on. They point to different things, but the one thing they all agree is this can't go on. And the only person running in this office, in this race, who said anything like that was Mr. Mamdani. So he got the votes. And if you're
to God's ear,
I got to tell you that. I mean, I'm still teaching in the university. I still have, people in their 20s and 30s sitting in my class. I mean, Mr. Cuomo and Mr. I always forget his name, the red beret guy.
Yeah.
They had with my students and the other students in the class, no chance. I mean, out of the question. They all voted there. And the difference is they were excited. Mamdani was exciting for them. The idea that they could affirm they don't care whether you're a Muslim or not, and they don't really care whether you're a socialist or not.
Change.
The young people, they're not getting the jobs they had hoped for. Their education is leaving them not with a good job, but with a load of debt, and they're bitter about it. And they have every right to be. They were led to believe that America would give them these opportunities, and they're not there. And no one seems to give a flying, to do anything about it. So along comes somebody who says, I'm different. Look at me. I got a beard. I'm a socialist. I'm a Muslim. And they go, great. Let's give you a chance.
Have a very attractive wife. There's that part. Good-looking guy.
I just learned that she's a great artist and has been recognized around the world. She's a real accomplished artist. His wife, He didn't make a deal out of that, which is good.
No,
Look,
he's.
I don't know him, but I'll tell you one thing that your audience might be interested in. He has a father, like most of us do. And I know who the father is. The father is Mahmoud Mamdani. He is a professor at Columbia University here in New York City.
Is he?
And the first book I ever wrote as a young professor was an analysis of British colonialism in East Africa, in particularly Kenya and that area of East Africa. I've been there. I had to learn Swahili to do it. I did that. I wrote this book. And in the course of that, I learned what the literature is, how other books written about Kenya, Tanzania, used to be called Tanganyika, changed the name, Tanzania, and Uganda. And Uganda is where the part of the family of Mahmoud Mamdani comes from. Anyway, Mahmoud the father, wrote the greatest book on East Africa that exists, on the colonialism, what the British did there. I wrote a book. I'd like to think I wrote a good one, but I have no hesitation in telling you that Zoran Mamdani's father has written the great book on that subject. And he's an internationally known and respected professor of anthropology and history. And it's just, he's a great international scholar. You know, it's kind of important that you understand that Zoran Mamdani comes out of his mother is a Hollywood filmmaker with good credits and good films under her belt. So he's got very creative, very accomplished parents, out of which he brings all that he learned at the dinner table over all those years.
That is awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Professor, always appreciate talking to you, man. Honest to God, I really do. Professor Wolff. He is professor of emeritus, professor of economics emeritus, University of Massachusetts Amherst, visiting professor, graduate program in international affairs for New School University in New York City, founder of Democracy at Work, host of their nationally syndicated show, Economic Update. Its latest book, The System is the Sickness When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. And it is available with his other book, Understanding Socialism, and Understanding Marxism, at democracyatwork.info. Professor, you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for this.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Jamal.
Have a good one. All right. And I see my man in the background. He hasn't been on the show for a while. I'm glad to have him back. Michael Maloof. How you doing, Michael? You doing okay today?
So far, so good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, always enjoy having you. Michael Maloof, he's former senior security policy analyst and Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, I have a question for you. Well, and you sent me a link on Dick Cheney, so I think you may want to hit that first before we move into the other subject.
Okay.
I was reading the New York Times obituary on Dick Cheney, and they mentioned he was an advocate for lower taxes. He was an advocate for democracy abroad. He was basically leaving out many of the other bits. It's like an obituary of Hitler, and you're saying that he had the trains running on time, leaving out the part about the genocide. You were in office, or at the very least, you were as an analyst during the time that Dick Cheney was doing this. What is it called? New America, the policy for a New America century. Give me your take on Cheney, since you were in your position as Dick Cheney was being Dick Cheney.
Well, I worked under Dick Cheney in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. He was the Secretary of Defense. He was very much, he was the Secretary during the time of the first Iraqi War, where we had Desert Shield, Desert Storm. You know, we had two separate Iraqi episodes. First was Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then in 2003, we had the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
Right.
I served under him in stopping. At the time of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we had picked up the potential for Saddam Hussein building up weapons of mass destruction, principally in the nuclear area. We had done the analysis. My office was there to try and stop diversions that went into those areas. And in fact, Cheney's big concern at that time as a Secretary of Defense was Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons buildup. And we had the evidence that it was occurring. In fact, on the eve of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, I actually worked a case of the diversion of a skull induction furnace that was going to melt zirconium to an area in the Karbala region that we knew there was no Western access, and yet the Commerce Department allowed that export to go, and we got it stopped, much to the consternation of the Commerce Department. In fact, they called my boss to get me fired because I dared to do that, to stop that export. And we also saw that it was part of a larger array of furnaces that were coming out of the UK at the time. So we were able to get UK involved in stopping any further exports for that purpose. But that was back in 1990, and in fact, it was during the Desert Shield phase that then Undersecretary Wolfowitz wrote to the Secretary Dick Cheney, highlighting our office as being involved in being able to track down these weapons of mass destruction at that time. And that's critical because fast forward to 2003, we didn't see that evidence. Between 1990 and 2003, there had been a lot of crisscrossing of inspectors. Scott Ritter was in and out all the time as an inspector. And we did not see the evidence of anything operational. And that's what led me then in 2003 to say, when they declared, and at that time, Cheney was vice president, declaring that they had weapons of mass destruction. And I said, well, we don't have that evidence. And that's when the establishment turned on me because I wasn't a team player. And part of my job too was he was also involved in the war on terror. And one of the things I did was the analysis on terrorist groups worldwide. And then to work, and then after 9/11 rather, to determine their choke points anywhere in the world, and then to get our special forces people to take them out. So, so we were involved in a lot of that stuff. But the change, of course, occurred when Cheney was insisting on the weapons of mass destruction. But there's another general misconception that it was the Defense Department that came up with the notion that on the whole element of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq in October 2002. It was CIA, and you'll notice that back in February of 2002 at the UN, when Colin Powell and then Secretary of State was talking about the evidence, George, what's his last name? I forget his last name. Who was then CIA director?
Oh, Tenet.
George Tenet. Thank you, George Tenet, who was sitting back there, and it was his people that came up with that notion that there were these weapons of mass destruction. And I was writing memos up saying we don't have the evidence. And in fact, during that period between January and March of 2003, I actually was sending memos up saying that I had been contacted by an intermediary from in Lebanon who was liaising with Syria, who in turn was in touch with the Iraqis, saying, look, we don't have weapons of mass destruction. We're even prepared to allow 5,000 U.S. troops to come in to look for it. And we're also willing to turn over a terrorist who was involved in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. And there was just two of about 5 or 6 terms, unconditional terms that Saddam Hussein was prepared to allow if we didn't invade, because he knew an invasion was imminent. But unbeknownst to me was the fact that it didn't matter whether we could come up with a reason for a link with terrorism or with WMD, that they wanted regime change. And that's the thing that I fault Cheney for as vice president, because he pushed that narrative along with Wolfowitz. And as a consequence, I got isolated and was basically ousted from Defense Department at that point.
Man, so the knives were out. And
the knives were out.
Actually, yeah.
In fact, the knives were out even before then, when I was subpoenaed to testify on some cases on Capitol Hill on China, and I knew right then and there my career was over.
It's like you got to be a team player, or otherwise you're screwed. That's unfortunate.
I was there to tell the truth, and we just did not have the evidence, and we weren't going along with the message, you know.
Well, you did your job, and
I did my job.
Yeah.
No regrets.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's just unfortunate. Question. Is Putin getting America wrong? Like and let me give you why I'm asking this question. So there was an article in TASS that came out. It says Russia sticks to approach for Ukraine unveiled in Alaska, diplomatic source. And one of the things that I noticed during the Alaska summit, where Putin and Russia and Trump came out, both of them made reference to a deal and an agreement that was apparently on the table. Now, from my understanding, Witkoff goes to Moscow. Witkoff has a conversation. Witkoff offers some kind of deal and agreement. Putin comes to Alaska, agrees with maybe some kind of modifications, and it was waiting for the U.S. response. Trump never responded. And what Trump did was effectively was seeking leverage by trying to go after Russian oil, trying to get India to stop using Russian oil. At one point, trying to get China, but at some point he realized, okay, well, China's a peer. We can't really do anything about China. But for all intents and purposes, have backtracked and went back from, we are trying to get a deal for the entirety of this, meaning we don't want a ceasefire, we want an entire deal, to now, well, we want a ceasefire, and we're going to try to pressure the Russians to get that ceasefire using sanctions to do it. Are the Russians making a mistake by continuously trying to push a diplomatic option? And are they getting the U.S. wrong? Meaning the pragmatism that Putin is going with is just being considered weakness, not pragmatism, in which case this is not the way of dealing with America.
I think I think Putin has been very steady in his approach. He's been restrained. I think he's been restrained. He could have wiped out Ukraine if he really wanted to, given the firepower he has and the missiles and the hypersonics, if he wanted to. And you notice he hasn't really advanced all that much into the western part of Ukraine. He has a goal, and he's sticking with it. He wants a buffer. He doesn't, and he has terms, and he has stated those terms time and again. It's just that the United States doesn't seem to know what it wants to do in terms of in resolving this conflict, simply because you have Zelensky, who is under is under a delusion from the Western countries in Europe that they will back him if he continues the war. And Trump can only do so much. And if Zelensky isn't buying in, Putin is just going to continue his operation. And I think that at some point he's got to get Zelensky to agree to a negotiation. But the minute he does, Zelensky is a dead man, and I've stated that before. Yeah. And so this goes on and on and on. But I think Putin has been consistent, and Moscow still wants a negotiated settlement. They certainly want to renew the relationship with the United States for much greater geostrategic reasons. And there are a lot of reasons why that should happen. Witkoff tended to be much more favorably inclined toward Putin's position, unlike Kellogg, who supports more of the Ukrainian position. But you don't see Kellogg very prominent in any of these discussions, especially when it comes to Russia. Russia doesn't even want him at the negotiating table with them. I mean, that's just pure and simple. But I think that the problem is going to be for the United States and Trump in particular to finally say, look, we're going to go do our thing with the Russians. We are going to resolve. We have a proposal. If Ukraine doesn't want to go along with it, I think this is what it's going to come down to. Eventually, Ukraine is going to say, look, we want to continue on. We have these promises from the Europeans who will continue to supply us with missiles and what have you. And I just don't see how the Europeans can really produce and provide Ukraine between now and 1930, which is what their goal is, simply because they don't have the economic wherewithal. They're broke, everything has been premised in the past upon U.S. backing up the Europeans, but Trump has other intentions. He wants to move on. He wants to resolve this conflict, and I think he's almost ready to wash his hands, do a little Pontius Pilate, and say, "Okay, you guys are on your own." But Putin has leverage. Putin has this leverage, which I just thought about the other day, and nobody has really brought it up. That if Trump goes along with sending and allowing long-range missiles to go to Ukraine, Putin has the leverage of sending hypersonics to Venezuela or to any of the other countries in Latin America that would be supportive and be anti-U.S. So there's a potential here that this thing could really mushroom into a far greater conflict than just a regional conflict in the Ukraine, and that's what's emerging right now.
Now, but Trump doesn't seem like he wants to extricate himself from this. And it doesn't seem, because it seems like there are two things going on at once. The U.S. president.
He could if he wanted to. I just don't know. I think it's due to the people that he's surrounded by. He has the neocons. He has constantly Rubio is constantly very anti-Russian, remains anti-Russian.
Yes.
He's certainly anti-Venezuelan, but
yes.
But you have that element, and he also has contributors he's got to cater to. So and also the CIA works against him constantly. They're joined at the hip with the MI6 and with Mossad, and you see their fingerprints in the whole Ukraine mess as well as in the Middle East. And for some reason, he can't extricate himself from that. The other problem is this: if he can't, what he could do is say, look, tell the Europeans, look, if you're going to continue arming Ukraine, even though we're trying to come to an arrangement and you're constantly undermining me, this is going to have an impact on the viability and the future of NATO, because we're not going to support you.
But all of that depends on if Trump does that. And I guess you're making my point for me. Right. A, he doesn't seem to be able to extricate himself. B, he doesn't seem to be able to accept a Russian deal. So it's like a U.S. president is not going to be able to accept a surrender in this case. And as you point out, all the people around Trump are pushing him against making an agreement, which means,
well, yeah, he's hit with so many issues right now that he can't focus on any one thing to get it over the goal line. And he right now he's very concerned about the whole tariff issue before the Supreme Court. That could really screw up his entire agenda. As he says, this is going to be the most important decision that comes out of the Supreme Court in some time. So I think it would be so his focus, and then he has the Middle East problem, and not to mention the internal political problem in the United States that he's having to deal with. And then when we come to springtime, all the American cities are going to start erupting again. So we have that to look forward to. So he's got his plate is full, and he doesn't need that conflict. Plus, he's talking about Venezuela and Colombia, and we're seeing now that because of our involvement in Ukraine, we're seeing now the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians now saying, okay, if you do it in our neighborhood, we're going to come to your neighborhood. It has to do with spheres of influence.
Yeah.
And all of these lines are beginning to blur. And we're going to be one thing is going to be related to another, even though they're distinctly different because of what is going on in the world today.
Explain that. You said all of these things are going to come together and blur because of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, your Ukraine crisis is one episode, but it's having an impact on what the reaction will be, as I just gave an example of, with Putin saying, okay, if you're going to continue arming them, we're going to come into your neighborhood with Venezuela. I mean, it makes logical sense to me that could be one of the outcomes, or establish new bases. You've got Brazil and China now getting very, very cozy with one another. You have the BRI. In fact, I think it was Venezuela. It was first in the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative of China from Latin America. So the influence, the Chinese and the Iranian influence is growing in Latin America. And that is one of the unsaid things as to why Trump is now focused on Venezuela, because of that influence. You got the Chinese actually building an alternative to the Panama Canal going through Nicaragua, I believe. They're building this huge canal that no one talks about. It's all Chinese built, being Chinese built. It's still in process. So there's all these things are going on, and in which these countries are extending their influence into what has traditionally been an area of U.S. influence, Monroe Doctrine and all that crap in Latin America. And these countries are beginning to turn because there is an alternative. And not to mention the fact that these countries, many of these countries, have also begun to join BRICS, or are partners, want to be partners with BRICS. So as I say, the spheres of influence and these separate crises in the world are beginning to blur in terms of their distinctiveness, because all the players are the same in each one of them. When you think about it.
No, you're right. I mean, there's influence. I mean, Russian
tremendous
planes,
influence.
cargo planes,
have
been
it's an evolving
military
thing.
equipment.
During his first term, Trump talked to Putin about the notion of reestablishing the whole concept of spheres of influence. I don't know why he doesn't raise that again and just get the hell out of Ukraine.
I don't know if he can. That's what I mean. Like,
well, that's
the playbook.
That's what's keeping him there, because of all these other pressures that are coming in. Not to mention the other issues that are imposing upon him, but also the people around him are keeping him in there. And you have the intelligence community that won't let him let go.
The playbook, from my understanding, especially from the Rand Corporation, was to overextend Russia. Do you think that's still the playbook that's in effect? I mean, because if it is, then the objective is not to get out from the Europeans or the US. The objective is for Russia to go further into Ukraine, to overextend. Give me your take on that.
Well, I think they'll go as far as Odessa and effectively cut Ukraine off from any access to the sea.
Black Sea. Yeah.
I don't think they want the western part, because you also have Poland and Lithuania and those countries wanting to get back certain areas of western Ukraine, which were traditionally under their empire in previous centuries. That's why we need to get out of this mess, because we had nothing to do with any of that. Their issues in that region go back far before the United States was even a country. Yeah. And we got to get away from that.
How far do policy documents go into the presidential thinking? Like, for example, like, how far do policy documents go into thinking in the White House? I mean, you were in the Pentagon. You used to do the analysis for the stuff. When you see something like, let's say, the Rand Corporation document on overextending Russia, or the documentation on Iran, where it's like, what is the name of it? The Pathway to Persia. How far do those documents go into the thinking of the White House?
I think they consider them. Whether they come out just as they are written in those policy position papers is another matter. I think it depends upon the conditions at the time and the influences that the principals are subjected to at that time. There may be elements that they're drawn from. I don't think that it's the policy of Trump to have regime change in Russia, as much as we see that in the UK, France, and Germany.
Yeah,
they want regime change. You know, during the previous Biden administration, that's what Tori Newland wanted. Her grandparents came from Tsarist Russia, which today is Western Ukraine.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the same with Blinken. His grandfather was from Kiev. At that time, it was part of the Russian Republic back in 1905. And he admitted that his grandparents came from Russia, not Ukraine, back in 1905.
Interesting. Wow, interesting.
So you see, it puts us in the position of having to fight 21st century. In the 21st century, we're fighting 18th century wars. We got to get over it. The Brits have been after the Russians for 300 years. And there's a history of that.
Yep. Those European wars. Like if you go back to like before Napoleon and these just fights back and forth. Yeah.
Well, you had Catherine the Great supporting the American colonies against the British blockade.
Yep. Yes. Yep.
And then in the U.S. Civil War, the Russian fleet actually docked in New York Harbor in support of the Union as a show of support. And then, of course, they sell Alaska to us. So the Russians feel they've had a hand in the founding of the United States of America, and they don't know why we're so against the Russians.
Why do you think we're so against the Russians? From your point of view, is it just the Soviet Union? Is that like just remnants of the Soviet Union? That's what we're living
people who are. It's the intelligence community. Their mindset, their whole thinking is in that Cold War I mentality. That's their comfort zone, and that's where they develop most of their sources from over a 50-year period, and it's their sweet spot. And that's why and then you have the neocons, or the neoconservatives, who want to go in there and basically bust up all of Russia. That's what they're talking about.
Before I let you go, can we hit Lebanon for a bit?
Sure.
I had Marwa Osman on the show. She lives in Lebanon. And today, I guess it was today, their time, Hezbollah put out a document effectively pushing the government, effectively saying, look, we need to have a united front against Israel. What is the point in signing a new agreement with Israel when they never lived up to the previous agreement? In Marwa, she had drones flying over her house, so much so that she did the interview in a different location in the house because they were so loud in regards to the flying around the house. Apparently, she sent me a text message just now, or maybe an hour ago after she got off the show, showing the maps where Israel effectively said, we have an evacuation order for people in various regions of Lebanon, with the belief that an attack is going to come shortly as a response to Hezbollah's letter. Give me your take on this. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the government hasn't, let's say, done the greatest job of defending Lebanon. Oftentimes they work hand in hand with the United States in this regard. But as she points out, we will defend our land, and the resistance will defend this territory against Israeli aggression. Do you believe an attack is going to take place?
Yes, I do. It's a feckless government. It's useless. They're at the bidding of the United States. Barack is very much working with them, but and the whole notion that Hezbollah is going to disarm is ridiculous. They're not going to do that. Even earlier, and the fact too that the Israelis are now reoccupying southern Lebanon is not going to work, and it's just a question of time before the whole thing flares up again. So Trump's notion that the Middle East problem has been resolved is a misnomer. It's just not true. But the Israelis are going to continue on because they know they got the U.S. support. But the U.S. representative there is totally useless, and he basically supports the Israeli position, and that's just not going to go over with the people of Lebanon.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just a matter of time before it flares up again.
the expectation is a war is going to reinitiate.
Right. Well, right now, the Israelis are an occupying force inside of a sovereign country of Lebanon, just like they are in Syria. But no one's yelling and clamoring about it and telling them to get out, or has the power to do it.
It's even worse than that.
The Turks might.
You think so? I mean, up to this point, Turkey has done everything in their power to avoid any kind of direct conflict with Israel. I mean,
so
both
far,
of them are,
but I think once their interests are crossed, I think something could blow. That's why this whole thing is a real tinderbox right now. But we don't hear, the mainstream media doesn't cover the potential for a flare up. Yeah, they say, well, the Gaza thing is resolved. Well, that's not the entire Middle East. You got the Israelis wanting to expand it and create this greater Israel. That's still their ambition. And the greater Israel means parts of Lebanon, Syria, and all the way to the Euphrates and the Nile. That's ultimately what they're after. And Smotrich and Ben Gvir have been very, very vocal about that. And these are guys that are in the cabinet. And Netanyahu has to go along, because if they walk, his government falls, and he cannot afford that.
Do you think, I mean, it seems that the U.S. is backing the Greater Israel Project. I mean, do you think this is, for all intents and purposes?
We're sort of forced and backed into it. And there you have contributors to Trump that are very pro-Israeli. So Trump is trapped.
It's the trap thing always gets me. I got to be honest, because it comes across as if people are trying to give Donald Trump a pass, either on the issue of Ukraine or, for that matter, on the issue of Israel, as if the president doesn't have.
He's catering to his contributors, and to the not only to AIPAC but also to the defense contractors.
Yeah,
the defense contractors love the business.
Well, right, because for them it's profit. It's just we make a huge amount of profit in selling weapons to either Europe or, for that matter, Israel. Yeah. Michael, man, I am so glad to have you back. I am so happy that you are with me. Michael Maloof, always love you, man, and the audience loves you too. Michael Maloof is former senior security policy analyst and Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, you be safe and have a good rest of your day, man. Bye-bye.
You too, Jamal. Thank you for having me.
All right. Shout out to Michael, man. We have come to the end. I don't know, man. I always have this. Look, from my point of view, the job of the president is to cater to American interests. There's this video of, what is his name? The last liberal president. Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon is asked about Israel. And Richard Nixon gives an answer that no U.S. president in our modern history probably could give. And he basically says, look, the interests of Israel diverges at times from the interests of the U.S. And my job as an American president is to work on what is in the best interests of America. Meaning these are not a one-to-one. Like, obviously, these are not a one-to-one, right? And so the idea that an American president is doing an Israel first policy is outrageous and, frankly, treasonous. And that's what it seems that Donald Trump has done. Whether it's on the issue of free speech, whether it's on the issue of going after people on, let's say, YouTube and whatnot, because YouTube has been removing videos of Israeli atrocities that have been taking place. This idea of Christian genocide. Okay, well, you ignore the fact that Muslims are also being killed in this process. You ignore the fact of the ethnic cleansing that has taken place in Syria with the guy's hand that you shook from ISIS. Like, meaning, this is rhetoric that is used and designed effectively, not just ignore the crimes that Israel is committing, but to somehow distract from those crimes. We are pretending as if a ceasefire is taking place in Gaza. There has been no ceasefire in Gaza. When you murder 100 people over the course of one day, How is that a ceasefire? How? How is that a ceasefire? It's not like you've been providing the amount of nutrition and everything else that you were supposed to provide in regards to the number of trucks that's supposed to go through. Meaning, it is a quote unquote ceasefire to allow Israel to accomplish its objectives without the loudness of the people being murdered on a massive scale in the public limelight, and to give some kind of cover to European governments, or for that matter, even the American government, as Israel commits its atrocities. And now Netanyahu, who requires war to stay in office, is now turning his attention to Lebanon. And as he occupies Syria, occupies areas of Lebanon, is now apparently setting up to go on a murder spree once again in a foreign country. All of this is outrageous. And as I make this case, there is no such thing as international law. I would have this conversation with anybody and they would lose this conversation because they're stuck with the realities of the way the world is effectively operating. You can't have a world that looks like this and then come to me and tell me there's a such thing as international law. It doesn't exist. Marwa just sent me the orders that Israel is effectively putting out. I would imagine of areas that they're about to murder people in. Their military on the ground is trash, which is the reason why they use air power to prevent their soldiers from getting their asses kicked. And Lebanon, Hezbollah, the resistance, pushed them out once before. The government doesn't seem to want to fire a shot in anger. And if anything, is working with the US government in order to try to fuck over the population and create a civil war, something that doesn't seem to take place, as Maloof pointed out. It's outrageous. It's completely outrageous. The United States, the fig leaf of democracy bugs the shit out of me, if I'm being bluntly honest with you. The public, when given an option, chooses difference for the best or for the worse. When Donald Trump presented himself as, hey, I'm a blue-collar billionaire, all of these other people are lying to you. I'm going to do something about the economy, and I'm a businessman, so hey, obviously I can do something about the economy. Forget the fact I went bankrupt 6 times. Don't worry about that. Trust me, I'm a billionaire. I'm going to be working your best interests. I'm going to have Elon Musk with me. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Rational actor looks at that and said, a man that just tried to overthrow the government of the US a few years ago, a man that is petty, sociopath, that only looks out and cares about his own interests, that is so thin-skinned that he surrounds himself with sycophants, is not going to do anything for your best interests. But the public, being stuck with rando politician that does dick when they get into office, is confronted with, here's this guy who's probably going to tear down the federal government and the federal infrastructure. And here's this other rando who's the normal politician that I'm so accustomed to that does nothing when they get into office. And what do they choose? They choose difference. When Sanders or Mandani runs in New York City, and the Democratic establishment hates his guts, and what does the public say? Hey, that guy seems to be different. Calls himself a socialist. He stands his ground. He's not getting bullied in the context of, hey, I'm going to Israel in order to, blow somebody in Israel. I'm not going to do that. I'm a New Yorker. I'm going to focus on New York issues. He holds his shape. We like that guy. And he wins in an overwhelming way in that particular election. Again, you have difference. When Sanders runs, they do everything in their power to effectively cheat Sanders. But he gets tens of millions of people to back him while calling himself a socialist. Now, Sanders is not necessarily a polished politician, and there are elements of Sanders that should have been different in order for Sanders to win that race, meaning willingness to fight, a knife fight in the phone booth. And if indeed the goal was to tear down the establishment, He should have effectively went his own way. But that wasn't Sanders' goal, right? For all intents and purposes, Sanders was scared. A scared man can't necessarily run a race if that man wants to win. I'm saying that when the public is presented with difference, it chooses that difference, providing they believe that that difference has the potential to actually win. My major point in saying that is what you typically get are two creatures of a political establishment that are serving the interests of that political establishment and serving the interests of the people who effectively fund and pay for that political establishment. If I give you two choices, both of which or neither of which is going to do anything in your interests, you're stuck with a Hobbes choice, which is not a choice at all. Meaning, under normal circumstances, your two political parties don't give you a choice. They don't give you an option. There is no option to say, fuck off to Israel. There's no option to say, hey, let's have healthcare, Medicare for all. There's no option to say, let's stop these wars. There's no option to say that maybe we don't want to put as much money or allow such money to come in from oligarchs that effectively run political affairs. You're given the illusion of choice in our political affairs. Does that mean that the political instrument can't do something different? The political instrument could do something different, as Professor Wolff kind of made the point of saying. It could, but if you notice, the argument that Wolff made during that time was talking about the 30s. That is 100 years ago, give or take 5 years. You had a communist revolution that took place in Russia, which scared the shit out of the U.S. establishment. You had a communist party. You had a socialist party. You had unions that were functional. Your country wasn't $36 trillion in debt. Those are elements that are not present today. It's a different model. I don't know how you change this, especially with a public that seems very anesthetized. It seems very out of it. We are murdering people in the Caribbean while simultaneously not paying the military. Put that in context, right? Your government is not even on. The lights are off. They can't even keep the air traffic straight because they're not paying those people. And yet they're out there murdering random people with illegal orders in the Caribbean. That's astonishing. No, we can't feed people. And there's another element to that that's pretty mind-blowing. I think the number was something like, let's say 40%. Hell, let's say 20% of the country was effectively using food stamps. I forget the exact number. And you think to yourself, why is the richest country on the planet have that many people that are in need of food assistance? That in and of itself should be an eye-opening situation. It doesn't seem to be. I'm always astonished by what we're okay with in America. That's all. Just astonished by it. And none of those things seem to arise the ire, the anger, the vindictiveness. And maybe part of that is, well, look, man, I got to feed my family. Oh, look, man, I got to make sure my kid gets to school. All of those things, which are just things that a society and people need to do just to function, right? Your life is occupied with all of those things. Because your life is occupied with all of those things, this other element of the political space seems to matter less to you. I guess my sense, though, and I guess the point that I'm trying to make is they're intrinsically linked. Your difficulties in life are not separate from the government that you have to give all of this tax money to. And yet, because your life is so full of these other things, it comes across that way. It's like, I do my job, why can't they do their job? But the government is not a typical job. For all intents and purposes, that device, that entity that is effectively there, that all things being equal, is supposed to be looking out for the best interests of the public to which the public that pays into it. Doesn't do that. And something needs to fundamentally change on that front. And yes, it's nice putting Mondani in. That's assuming that Mondani can do whatever Mondani is going to do as a mayor. But that's one city out of a country of 320 odd million people. And if you look at the other races that took place, those were rando Democrats that are not going to do anything of significance as governor or in whatever other rando position that you put those people into, who effectively just made the argument, I'm rando Democrat, Donald Trump sucks. Put me in, folks. Something needs to change on that front. This is not democracy in the way that democracy is supposed to run. This is something else. All right, I'm going to end this. We have come to the end. I want to thank all of you for joining me. We've had a really good show today. Shout out to Professor Wolff. Shout out to Michael Maloof. Shout out to Marwa Osman. Shout out to Ted Rall. And shout out to all of you for joining me, all of you for being able to be under the sound of this voice. You have my deepest appreciation for being so. And I will see you bright and early in the morning. I need to book guests for tomorrow. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I need to book guests for tomorrow. Anyway, you all be safe. You all be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Oh, by the way, like the video. If you haven't hit the like button, share the content. You can support PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Super Stickers, memberships. All of those things help the show. As I keep pointing out, I would like to get a producer. The show needs to grow in order to make that work. I think that's everything. Be safe all. I'll see you tomorrow.